It's been a long time.
It has been a surprisingly long time. It was like
2 weeks ago, right?
Yes, it was the 18th. So it's 2 weeks and a day.
Wow.
Man, I missed you guys.
A lot has happened in the meantime. Chiefly that I determined that I like the beach now.
It's funny how that is. We should actually examine that.
How old are you now that it took so long?
Whoa. Before you beat up on Marco, I will tell you that I just discovered I like the beach about 2 to 3 years, maybe 3 years ago. So apparently Marco and I are equally slow on this realization.
I don't know what's wrong with you guys.
How many times did you have to rent a house on the beach for a few days to like it?
I actually would say the first time we did that, I liked it, but it is important to note that I was well into adulthood at this point, and I don't remember, was it with you guys I was discussing this? It might have been on the post show, but the pop-up, what do they call them? Like awnings? Or not awning, I forget.
They call them umbrellas. You push the middle and the
No, we were the little tent thingies.
Yeah, it's like a tent, but it's just the roof part of the tent. So it's like a big square that's like...
Yeah, we saw a picture of your thing that you should never, ever bring on a beach.
Why?
Because that's not a thing designed... That's for like having like a catered outdoor wedding.
Oh, yeah,
It's
totally.
Not for bringing on the beach.
Instant canopy is apparently what it's officially called.
Mm-hmm. Do not bring it to the beach.
You know, if you want a lot of shade from the sun, which is what I want when I go to the beach, that's a perfect way to do it.
Well, but as discussed last time, those tend to have a pretty poor shade to weight ratio. They're awfully heavy for the amount of shade they provide. We had a very large kind of extended umbrella. So you, like the idea, you put it like diagonally down, so like the pole is running diagonally with one end in the sand, and then the other side just kind of resting on the sand. But it has like extra long flaps on two sides, so it kind of makes like a tent, but that's open on one side, so you get a ton of shade in the total weight of an umbrella. So it's pretty. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that works out nicely. I've seen things like that. So to go back a half step, so the first time we rented a house that I participated in anyway, we had one of these instant canopies. The point is not as much the instant canopy, just the fact that there's shade. However you decide to get your shade, umbrella, tenty thing, instant canopy, doesn't matter. There's shade.
Indoors.
Indoors. So I had shade. I think the first year I went, I read Ready Player One. And don't listen to what John says about Ready Player One. It's a great book. I also had booze. And that combination really worked out nicely for me. And ever since then, I've found that if I have shade and a book or a, iOS device with a internet connection, and I don't even need booze anymore, although it helps. It actually is not too bad an experience. So what turned the corner for you, Marco? What made you decide this is not so bad?
So last year we went to the same place, Fire Island. We spent 5 days there. So part of the problem was that I was really sick for most of that time. So I wasn't really able to fully enjoy the time. This year we were there for 7 or 8 days, and I was not sick. So even last year, the shorter time and being fairly uncomfortable most of the time, I still enjoyed it last year. I still enjoyed the place. I enjoyed walking around because while I don't really care for the actual beach itself very much, I do like the ocean breeze, the air. I do like the beach town, and in Fire Island it's pretty awesome because you just kind of walk around everywhere. Like there's no cars and everything's really kind of tightly packed on this little tiny strip of island, so everything's very walkable. And so I really enjoyed that part of it last year, but just it was hard to really enjoy the whole trip because of my condition. But this year I spent a little more time on the actual beach this year, and I kind of learned how to make it work for me a little bit. I still don't love like being in the sun or going in the water or eating seafood, but I've found ways to enjoy myself on the actual beach. And then because we were there for longer and I was feeling better this year, I greatly enjoyed the rest of the town and the week and the environment as well. So basically, I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And like 8 days was enough time. I feel like if you're somewhere for like 3 to 5 days, you kind of are still in vacation, like sightseeing kind of mode, or like active mode the whole time. And there's a certain threshold, which I think I passed this trip, where like if you're somewhere for long enough, you kind of start living there. Does that make sense?
It does, actually. I do know what you're saying.
Like you kind of get kicked into a different mode. We're like, okay, now this is just like what it's like to live here, basically, for a short time, as opposed to like being like active, doing stuff, vacation mode, the whole time. So I got a brief sense of that like living mode, and I really enjoyed it.
So what made the beach itself bearable, though? Like I had said that, in the past having booze in a book, and I should actually elaborate that having Declan there, particularly when he's in a positive mood, which is usually, that's also just tremendously fun. What turned the corner for you on the beach specifically?
Well, so part of it was that, part of it was that the entire family really enjoys it. So everyone's happy, everyone's having fun. There's always like stuff to do. Nobody's ever bored. So that's really nice. But also, I just kind of figured out like how to sit in the shade for a little bit. This year, I've kind of, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably some of both. But I'm finally learning how to be able to turn my brain off for more than like 20 minutes at a time. Like in the sense like I'm able to like relax and not wish I was sitting at a computer getting stuff done all the time. And this could be dangerous. Like this could go too far, and I just never want to work again. I think I'm going to try to get a better balance of that. And so I kind of got that this year, where I like last year because I was pretty sick and it was a shorter time, and I was right in the middle of trying to write piece. So last year I actually worked a lot on that trip. I mostly like stayed back at the house and everyone else went to the beach, and I mainly just worked on my laptop. This year I brought all my work with me. I thought I'd get a lot done, and I got almost nothing done. It would like shockingly little considering like how much I got done last year versus this year. So I kind of learned how to take a vacation. And it was to the point where like when I came home, I really missed it, which has never, ever happened with any vacation I've ever taken.
That's awesome.
Every vacation I ever take, when I get home, like, oh, thank God I'm home, I can get back to everything. This time I was like, oh, I miss vacation. Anyway, so I'm broken forever. How are you guys?
Well, I'm waiting for John to completely eviscerate us for having just realized that the beach is a thing, and you've been distressingly quiet, John. So tell us, what do you have to say about the beach?
I love that like it's extra insulting that I'm also going to Fire Island, which I'm pretty sure is where John has gone for beaches for years.
No, I don't go to Fire Island, but I go to other places in Long Island. The only thing I think I have to add is that I have not wanted to work and love the beach since I was in single digit ages, so way ahead of you. You're just now getting to the point where you don't want to work and love the beach. Congratulations. I think that pretty much the rest of the human race is way ahead of you on that curve. That's what everybody wants to do, is not work and go to the beach. And you're just like, you know what? The beach is fun. Working sucks.
Turns out. Yeah, I never knew.
So like, there's a few ways, actually there's many ways in which I am a terrible geek by like typical geek standards. One of those things is I don't like anime or Star Trek or fantasy like Lord of the Rings type stuff.
You don't know you don't like anime.
Okay. And so anyway, I think in this way, John, I think you're a bad geek. I think most geeks have the problem that I've had forever, which is not really being able to turn my brain off for more than like a day or two without getting restless.
No, that's not a geek thing. That's a workaholic thing. There's a difference.
Yep, concur.
Is it? Well, I bet there's a lot of overlap there, because like it's not necessarily that I want to do specific work. It's that I want to do I want to do something.
That's why you're a workaholic.
But I'm not, because I don't want to work on like boring stuff to get it done. I want to work on like weird MP3 encoders and stuff.
Well, you're also bad at relaxing. When you were describing like, oh, I finally got into like the vacation mode where it's like you're living there. It's like, no, you just finally relaxed. Like, and it's true. Like Merlin talks about this too. How like he goes on a vacation, takes him like 3 days to get into whatever mode. He has another weird phrase, but it's just like you have to learn how to relax, and that's another skill that I've always been very good at. I'm really good at relaxing. I'm an expert at relaxing. In fact, I think most people are. Most people, if you said, starting now, sit on your butt and do nothing, they just descend into a little puddle and be like, ah. But some other people, it takes a while to sort of to untie the 700 twisty ties that are around their invisible twisty ties that are around their brain at all times, and just slowly unwind them and turn. And then finally they release and you can go, ah, and then you go home after the vacation's over.
Yeah. And I did finally, I was thinking of you, John, much of the time, because as I was trying to like manage having a big camera and my phone at the beach, of course, sand is everywhere. Sand in my pockets. You know what else is in people's pockets? Sand. I was thinking of you and your quotes from this show going back years of every time I was at the beach, like doing something.
Yeah. So how did your big fancy camera fare in the hostile environment of the beach?
Very well, actually. I did, funnily enough, I did appreciate when I had the slightly longer lens on it. I brought the 35 and the 55 primes, and the 35 pictures were decent, but I was happier in general with the 55 pictures. And I got a lot of amazing pictures, and just destroyed my laptop trying to process them in Lightroom on battery, which is hilarious. But
so how far were you out in the water with the expensive camera? Like ankles, knees?
Well, I was still in the wave zone, so like not necessarily a fixed depth, but at the closest I would let it get was like the bottom of my shorts. Like once I was that deep, I would hold the camera up above my head if there was like a big wave coming in, or like, and there were, I think twice it got a little bit of splash on it. But otherwise it was pretty good.
I think for someone with not a lot of beach experience, I don't think you realize exactly how close you were that entire time to destroying your camera, because you're like, oh, well, if the wave comes, I'll hold it up. But you don't realize that like all it takes is one false move or not paying attention for 2 seconds in one wave that's a little bit bigger than the other ones to put you on your butt and put that camera in the water. So I think you're pretty lucky and pretty brave to go out even that deep with your camera.
I think you might be overestimating how deep I was. It was literally like I was only in like the wave splash zone, and the most I got was if the wave at maximum splash was tall enough to get the bottom of my shorts wet.
Yeah, those waves did look pretty small though in the few pictures you had. But yeah, I'm saying, like if the water is touching your bathing suit,
yes,
you think, oh, I'm fine, right? Especially because when the big one comes, so much water will go out that it'll just be barely touching your ankles, and you'll take 2 steps in, and the big one comes, and you're not paying attention. Sploosh. Anyway, I'm glad you dodged the bullet and managed to keep your camera alive and take some good pictures.
Yeah, I really got a lot of great pictures, and I spent a lot of time just like picking through them and lightly processing them, posting a few some on Instagram, and I finally started. I think now I'm kind of getting what vacation is about. Funnily enough, though, every time I take a vacation where I have my giant 15-inch MacBook Pro, I am so happy I have that 15-inch MacBook Pro and not anything smaller or weaker. Because like the things I do on vacation, like either I need nothing from it, or I need all the power and screen space I can get. So my previously stated plans about maybe going to a 13-inch MacBook Pro when the new ones come out, those plans are out the window, and I'm going to either keep what I have or get the new 15.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand how anyone who doesn't travel for a living has anything smaller than a 15-inch laptop. Like, I typically do not use my work laptop at home, and it's always clamshelled at work. And whether or not you think that's a smart choice, whatever. But the point is, I very rarely use the screen on the laptop, but every time I do, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't understand how anyone could do anything productive with less real estate. Again, if you're like traveling professionally, totally get that. But for regular humans, 15 all the way.
Oh yeah, I mean like I tweeted it the other day. I pissed everybody off where I said basically like as I'm using my laptop, like the things I want are better battery and faster. Thing I don't really care about is make it like 15% lighter. I think so. I think whatever measure I used. And this got a lot of people angry because they were saying, I walk with mine to work every day, blah, 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 and I would love for it to be 15% lighter. And I get that, because I used to do that too. I did that for years. The majority of the time I worked at Tumblr, I was walking with a laptop in a bag pretty far every day, and most of the time it was a 15-inch. And this was back when the 15-inch was like 5.7 pounds. Now I think they're 4.5, and they're probably about to get lighter. So like, I know what that's like. And in fact, much of that time I also had an SLR and a couple lenses in the bag with me as well, which was not kind on my shoulders. So I get that. If you're walking with it back and forth, that does, the total weight of it does matter. However, when you get down to like, you have like already a 4.5 or whatever pound laptop, if the weight savings brings it down, like let's say it's a pretty good savings. Let's say it goes from 4.5 pounds to 4 pounds. That's a pretty substantial savings in the world of like, laptop upgrades, basically. Suppose they blow it out of the water somehow, which I think is unrealistic, but let's say they go to 3.5. So let's say they shave a whole pound off of it. Again, I think that's unrealistic. But if they do that, the total weight of the bag you're carrying is probably like 15 pounds. Like, people carry a lot of stuff in their bags. The bag itself weighs a lot empty. If you're carrying a power adapter or not, that's like another like almost pound. Like, people carry so much that if you really, really need to save half a pound or 1 pound in the carry weight of your bag, there are probably many other ways you can do that, And if you're carrying enough stuff, you actually might not quite notice that very much. Like it's so basically, I think people when they speculate on how much they need laptop weight savings in these little increments, I think they might be overestimating how much they would actually notice that in practice, how much difference it would actually make in practice, and ignoring ways that you could save that in some other way. So, for example, like one of the ways I save weight when I was walking to and from work with laptops every day is I just got a second power adapter and kept one at work. So I never had a power adapter in my bag.
Yep.
And that alone, these are, this was the 15-inch days, so that saved like a pound right there, like simple stuff like that. And, like if you carry, an iPad, or maybe don't carry the keyboard. Like there's stuff like that. Like there are ways you can either spend a bit of money to have some redundancy on both ends, and things like power adapters or accessories, or just make some tough decisions about, do I really need to carry this thing? If carry weight's a big problem, I highly suggest using a backpack and not a messenger bag. Like there's lots of other ways you can do this that will have way larger effects than if your laptop alone with no other changes got 15% lighter. I
agree. All right, we should probably do a little bit of follow-up now that we're 20 minutes into the program.
Just a little.
I'd like to start with a couple of notes. First of all, I have returned my 32 gigs of RAM. Oh. I have received 32 replacement gigs of RAM, and my uptime is currently 9 days.
Are you plugged into the UPS?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I'm expecting the... No, I'm just kidding.
Are you recording in MOV format?
I am recording in every freaking format under the sun.
What color are you recording in? Are you recording in MOV?
Yeah.
That's not even how you pronounce the color.
Oh, my goodness. But anyway, so I have 9 days uptime so far. We'll see if it continues. Of course, now I have several system updates I've been putting off for my testing purposes, so please don't hack me. But so far, so good, as I knock very quietly on wood. Moving on, I have not yet looked at the Reddit, because I don't really go to Reddit ever, and I haven't been trolling their mentions because I haven't had the time nor the inclination. However, if the entire internet isn't beating the piss out of Hello Internet for issuing an episode on vinyl, then I give up. Because I paid the price for saying that vinyl may not be an embarrassment for months. And here it is, they're releasing an entire special episode of Hello Internet on vinyl. If all of you jerks aren't going after them...
Wait, really? I didn't even know this.
He's been on vacation.
If all of you jerks aren't going after them like you went after me, then I'm sorely disappointed, because they deserve it.
You shouldn't be, because they're doing it as a joke. Get it? It's funny. And on the show where they talk about it, they throw in a few digs at the people who think vinyl sounds better. Haha, those people, what are they thinking, right? Like, so they're on the right side there on this whole thing, and the whole idea is that it's silly and a joke. The entire thing is a joke. So why would people make fun? If they had released it and said, finally, people can listen to our voices in a higher fidelity format, then people would be on them. Believe me, but that's not what they said.
I wonder, like, how many people who so this is apparently like extremely sold out now. How many people who buy this have a way to even play it? Like, if
that was discussed on the program.
Like, I went here to come buy it, but like, if I even could get myself a copy, which I can't right now, they're sold out, but if I could get one, I'd have to like go to my mom's house or go to Casey's dad's house to actually play it. And by the way, because vinyl is so stupid, it's only 45 minutes long and you have to flip it in the middle.
You clearly did not live through the Laserdisc era.
They should have used smart speed to record it. They could have put more on.
Well, yeah, at least Laserdisc players, they would most of them would the whole head would flip, so you didn't have to move the disc. But yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that you'd have to go to my dad's house, because I really don't think most people understand that I don't even have a record player. I don't have a turntable because I don't have the space nor the inclination for it. But
because they're terrible.
In any case, I expect the internet. I expect the internet to say, hello, internet. You guys are idiots, because that's what you did to me, and I understand the distinction.
But you shouldn't expect it. You understand it's a joke. Do you understand that on the program they directly addressed the thing that everyone was yelling at you about, and they said the opposite of what you said?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I heard it. But anyway. So all of you jerks, you can go after them now.
Can we release an episode on cassette?
Sure.
Maybe, actually,
although,
you know what we should do?
Mini disc?
8-track.
Floppy disk.
8-track. God, you are old. And floppy disk, you're not going to get a lot of space.
8-track, you don't have to flip that. It just keeps playing.
That's true, actually.
If we really cram down the bitrate and do like HEAAC, I'm pretty sure we can get like 10 minutes on a floppy, maybe?
No, it should come on like 17 floppy disks.
That'd be amazing.
you just
That
have to
would
keep
be
putting
awesome.
away. I remember I took the, I think I've told the story before, but my biggest floppy disk story is, you remember the 1984 Apple commercial? Well, in the early days of QuickTime, Apple put out a QuickTime version of the 1984 commercial, which must have been like lower resolution than a macOS icon is today. And it was like with the Cinepack compression algorithm, it looked terrible and it was really small. But I was so excited to have it. Like I had a digital version of that commercial that I, because back before you had video on the internet, how many times as a Mac fan had you seen the Apple 1984 commercial? On the Clio Awards, retrospectives and stuff like that. But in general, you tended not to see the ad anywhere. You couldn't just go look at it on YouTube. There was no YouTube, there was no video. So finally I had a copy on video. But the only way I could store it anywhere was to put it on floppy disk because that was my only removable media. So I did a multi-part Stuff It Expander archive in 25 parts and on 25 floppy disks.
Oh my God.
I think I still have it with like a rubber band around the thing. It's like 25 floppy disks. And if I was to take them, put each floppy disk in, piece at a time onto like a hard drive or something, and then reassemble them into whole, then decompress it, I would have a tiny postage stamp size video of this commercial.
So my favorite floppy disk story, which I've mentioned probably on the show before, was when I was a kid, we ran OS2 at home because Dad worked for IBM. And you can say a bunch of terrible things about OS2, but in some ways it was superior. God, this doesn't sound familiar at all, does it? But anyway, yeah, so OS2 was the vinyl of operating systems. In some ways it was superior, but I got my Dad got his hands on a beta of OS2 Warp, and that thing was on, I kid you not, something like 50 floppy disks, or well, they were the, what was it, 3.5, so they weren't really floppy at that point, but anyway, the 3.5-inch disc.
Well, they were internally floppy.
Yeah, right. And so I remember installing that thing. Took me like 14 weeks because it was just sit there and wait across each of these discs. It was ridiculous.
See, this is why I'm not nostalgic about vinyl, because I grew up with a record player in the house that my mom used regularly and that I would occasionally use as well. And it annoyed me. And I grew up then, eventually when computers happened, I grew up with 5 1/4 and then 3.5-inch floppy disks, and lived through cassette tapes before CDs were a thing. So all these old technologies, like us looking back on vinyl, I think is going to be like if our children, when they are old enough to become their own version of hipsters, when they look back, if they have fond recollections of cassette tapes, even though they really kind of never used them. And they're terrible. I don't know. Vinyl to me is, I don't see why it's any better than cassette tapes. And cassette tapes themselves are terrible. And we moved on, and I've moved on, and the world has moved on, and everyone has moved on except Casey.
Right. So speaking of moving on from old things, let's talk about installing operating systems on one machine and then moving to another.
Oh, geez, I forgot about this.
Yeah, a lot of people were angry at Marco because
Marco said
mean things about Windows, and he was angry, and now people are angry that he was angry. But I'm mostly setting that aside because I feel like Marco has taken his medicine from all the Windows users who have emailed him to tell him what he said is wrong and hurtful.
Oh, no, I have opinions about that.
Oh, God.
All right. Well, anyway, you can address that. But the only reason I put this in here is because one of the points that was brought up, and in fact I brought up in the program, was the idea that Marco was going to install Windows onto an external drive and boot multiple, possibly different machines from it, like boot a laptop, not just 2.5K iMacs, but boot a laptop from it, or install Windows when it's connected to a laptop, then use that same disk to boot the 5K iMac, which has very different hardware. And many Windows wrote in to tell us, well, why did you ever think that would work? And like I said on the program, that's a bad idea for a variety of reasons. But it's not just as, Mac or Apple fans might think, because OS X is better and Windows is crappy. Because OS X, as most Mac users know, you can install that on a disk connected to pretty much any computer and then plug it into pretty much any other computer, and it boots that computer fine.
Yeah, which one person wrote in to say, OS X wouldn't work that way either, and it actually does work that way the vast majority of the time.
Yeah, I replied to the person that, yeah, it does. But here's the thing. All right, so this is all true. It does work that way. And if you're mostly a Mac user or mostly recently a Mac user, you might think that Windows work the same way. Like, it's a reasonable mistake. Not quite as reasonable for Marco, who spent a long time with Windows, but still, we'll set that aside. But like I said, the reason OS X works that way and Windows doesn't is not because Microsoft is dumb and Apple is smart in this particular case. It's because it's basically impossible for Windows to do what OS X does. OS X installs everything in its OS installation, all the drivers, just everything on there, because why not? It only supports a very limited range of hardware. Apple knows every piece of hardware in every single machine that is officially supported by this operating system, and that set of hardware is small. Windows can't take every driver for every machine that Windows can possibly run on and install it, because your installation would be gigantic. It's literally impossible. There's too many drivers from too many different places. They have to do a thing where they do kind of like a custom install for just the hardware that you have. Now, you might say that Windows could then, after boot up time, be smarter about pulling down new drivers on demand or whatever, but anything involved in the boot process or like getting the video driver to work so your thing can even get to the point where it's downloading stuff, it's very complicated. Like, basically, the option that Apple goes with is not available to Microsoft. They cannot say, we're just going to install the same files in every single Windows installation, and then it'll boot every single computer. So if you had thought about it for a little while, even if you had no experience with Windows, you would think, wait, they can't do the Apple thing, which is kind of a shame, and it's Microsoft's own fault for having the business model that brought them to massive dominance of the PC industry for most of my entire life. But here it is, boomeranging back around, and it means that Marco can't get a game to work in a timely fashion.
All right, so a couple of very small updates to that story. Basically, so most of the hatred for my actions in this story, which again was quite strong, most of the hatred focused on a few key points. Number one was, I can't believe you expected that to work by having an external drive installation move between computers, as you covered just now. Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have expected that to work. I forgot how picky Windows was about drivers. I haven't used Windows reliably, or I haven't used Windows really at all in about 10 years, and I haven't used it heavily in about 12 years. So, yeah.
Well, and on that, before you move on to the next thing, there is a somewhat reasonable chance that you could have thought that this would work because you were, of course, installing the boot camp drivers, and the boot camp drivers are in exactly the same situation as, like, they only have to support a limited amount of hardware. So in theory, perhaps the boot camp drivers, had they been really good and comprehensive, could have installed the full set of drivers that would boot any boot camp capable machine, but obviously they did not do that, and we've heard from many people that the boot camp drivers are a little bit old and creaky and have not kept up with the advancements in Windows, which doesn't surprise me because Apple's support for boot camp always seems kind of half-hearted in the last, let's say, half decade.
Right. But yeah, to be fair, that is the assumption I made. Secondly, the issue came up that I did hit the skip activation thing, or like remind me later about activation in setup. The reason why I hit that is not because I was being lazy. And I forgot to mention this during the show. It's because I knew people had told me that if you activate on the external drive and you plug it into a different computer, it'll break the activation and you'll have to reactivate by calling Microsoft or whatever the heck you have to do. So I knew that was a risk. So I was waiting until it was going to be on the computer that the game was going to be played on to activate. So I was trying to get the whole thing set up on my laptop so I wouldn't have to disturb Tiff's computer and its uptime because she was working on it. So I was trying to get it all set up on my laptop first, and then I was going to move the drive over there, activate it there so it wouldn't break, and then move on. There's also ways that you can get, like, pirate keys, volume license keys to get around all this, but I was doing this legally, so, I had to actually follow the wonderfully abusive legitimate customer restrictions. Thank you DRM.
You.
Yeah, that's the penalty I get for doing things legally. And finally, the argument that I was being unfair to Windows and that Windows doesn't suck, and that I suck for saying that Windows is stupid, I respectfully disagree. Even though some of the things I did were not correct, Windows is stupid and it does suck.
I'm sure that will totally address that email.
Yes, totally.
Good counter argument.
Yes.
We'll summarize that, but in all caps, by saying no U with the O and the U transposed. One more tidbit on Inside before we move on to Marco's fame and glory. If you want to hear both me and Tiff talk about Inside, as played on both the Mac and the PS4, there will be an upcoming episode of The Incomparable that we are both on where we discuss it, and I hope Marco was far away from the room when that was going on because we spoiled the whole thing.
I went to the entire other side of the house just so I wouldn't overhear anything.
Good plan. Anyway, play the game, then listen to The Incomparable.
We We have a new sponsor this week. We are sponsored by Contentful. Contentful is a content management developer platform that enables web and mobile developers to manage, integrate, and deliver digital content to any kind of device or service that can connect to an API, be it smart cars, VR, mobile, web, digital signage, or any new platform. In other words, it's a content-as-a-service platform based around a content API. It's kind of like a CMS, because ultimately it's used for managing content, but very much unlike WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, and other things like that, Contentful expects you to bring your own custom front end. So you still create and manage and structure your content, but you wouldn't set up its appearance directly in the CMS. Contentful is optimized for and loved by developers. Using the API, they request content from Contentful, and then they're free to do whatever is necessary with it for display or whatever else. The advantage of this approach is that the process becomes much more flexible. While editors still enjoy a familiar way of creating content, developers can easily plug Contentful into their projects since the content becomes structured and code-friendly. The content-as-a-service approach means there's no tech infrastructure to set up and maintain. Your content is always available in the Contentful cloud, and you simply use it. Contentful is used by a number of well-established companies such as Specialized, Jack in the Box, Nasty Gal, and many others. If you want to learn more about Contentful, feel free to check out their website, shoot them your questions via Twitter at Contentful, or look for their team at the upcoming tech conferences. They'll be at API World, DroidCon New York City, London and Vienna, GitHub Universe, RubyConf, Web Summit, PHP World, and many more. So check it out at Contentful.com for more information. Thank you very much to Contentful for sponsoring our show.
Today, or no, was it yesterday? Yesterday, I'm sorry. The App Store made some news, and then I think there was a little bit more today as well. So yesterday, Apple has said that they're going to start removing old and busted apps from the store. That's my summary, but that's basically what it amounts to. And they also said that the names of apps can no longer be something like Tweetbot, a power user's Twitter client, or something like that.
Actually, that probably still would fit.
Well, you know what I mean. So it has to be 50 characters or less. And the idea is they don't want you gaming their piss poor search by adding search keywords and terms into your app title. So they expect the app titles to be 50 characters or less. Awesome. This is great news. I'm really pleased by this. So I have nothing really, I have not much more to say. I think Fasttext would have run afoul of this, most likely. And to be honest, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very good thing in general. I mean, if you look at they're a little light on the specifics of what they're going to prune out, but it's like, if the app crashes on launch, it'll be removed immediately. So if you have some old app that no longer literally doesn't even work, they're just pulling it with no warning to the developer. Just, oh well. They're enforcing basically if there's any new rules that weren't around when the app first passed app review, but it is actually violating those rules, then they are retroactively enforcing them. So basically, it used to be that if you got through once, or before the rule was in effect, you could basically keep doing it forever, and as long as you didn't update your app, which is not a great system. So they're kind of closing that loophole. Now they're going to go back and re-review apps under modern rules. And if they no longer pass the rules because the rules have changed or something slipped through, that they will now be enforcing that on those apps and removing them if they have to. And then the big thing, which I think is more interesting, is basically, I forget exactly how they phrase it, but it's like unmaintained or abandoned apps. And so they haven't said specifically what that means, but what I assume that would mean are things like if you still don't have a 64-bit binary, because I'm assuming part of the reason they're doing this is to get the App Store ready for a future version of iOS, probably iOS 11, that doesn't have 32-bit support at all and won't launch 32-bit apps at all. Things like if you still don't have Retina support, or if you still don't have support for the larger screens on the phones. On the iPad, I'll be interested to see how strict they will be, because the iPad has a lot more challenges in this department. iPads were non-Retina for longer, and a lot of iPad software got written in the non-Retina days and then never updated because it wasn't worth it to pay some consultants to update your software or to rewrite games or whatever else. So I wonder, are they going to be as strict on the iPad? The 12.9-inch iPad launched, and it's really crappy to use 9.7-inch apps on the 12.9-inch iPad, especially if you have to use the keyboard for any kind of text input. The on-screen keyboard is horrible when it gets blown up. So it'll be interesting to see, like, basically how strictly they enforce that kind of unmaintained and abandoned rule. And if it assuming it applies to things like supporting new screen sizes and new modern builds that include the right architectures and stuff like that. But then basically, how strict will they be, and what else will it include?
I can't imagine them doing the screen size thing, because unless they include other factors, because I have apps from large multinational corporations that are updated very frequently that still don't support my iPhone 6 screen size. You can tell from like the slightly too big keyboard and everything. And these are not abandoned. These apps that are frequently updated, bugs are fixed, features are added, and yet they still don't support the screen size. So I don't think that qualifies as abandoned, and I don't think Apple can, politically speaking, pull apps like that under the guise of we're cleaning out abandoned things. The 64-bit, 32-bit, yeah, because that's coming no matter what anyway, and they're just laying the groundwork. But screen size, I don't think, especially, like, I think their definition of abandoned has to be some set of those things plus also has not been updated in 6 months or a year or something.
Maybe, but I don't know. I mean, because some of these things they can enforce at the iTunes Connect level. So they could say, like, all right, iTunes Connect no longer accepts apps that are 32-bit only, which it probably hasn't for, over a year now. They could say things like iTunes Connect no longer support, or no longer will allow you to submit an app that doesn't support the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus screen sizes. And then 6 months after that, they can say, well, if you don't support these screen sizes and haven't updated your app in over 6 months, they can make a loophole if they want to. And that is probably how some of these things will play out. But I mean, one thing, like, most apps that do that, like if they're still getting updates, like the official Tesla app is one of these apps where the Tesla app it gets updates like every few months, but it still doesn't support the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus screen sizes. Like, it has the modern keyboard and everything, but it's still just not supporting larger screens, because like it's all like pixel perfect iOS 6 style designed, and I assume they don't want to like go back and pay somebody to redesign it to blow it up and everything. But like, that's kind of crappy. And so if they can use this to push companies to update their ancient broken apps that they're basically just not updating out of laziness, or not moving to modern stuff because of laziness, or just not wanting to allocate the funds for it, this is probably a good thing. It's definitely a good thing for users, and for developers who are in the consulting business, it is almost certainly a good thing, because this is probably going to be a big boon to consulting, because all these companies that have all these ancient iPhone and iPad apps, they didn't really have any kind of push before to want to put more money into them, but now they're going to have a big push if Apple says, you need to update this to support X, or we're going to pull you out of the App Store in 30 days.
I still think the vast majority of this is going to be cleaning out the crap that no one has looked at in forever, that it also isn't making any more money. So I think the vast majority of the garbage is just crap that was released once, never updated, stopped making money 3.5 years ago, and it's just in the store. Like, and the meta story about this, as everyone who has written anything about it has pointed out, and as I think is obvious to everybody looking at it, is this marks the end of the era when Apple is touting the number of applications in the App Store as their prime measure of how awesome they're doing. It's like, I mean, they should have stopped this long ago, because as I think we've all talked about on past programs over the years, once you get into the hundreds of thousands or millions, the number of apps you have in the App Store is a detriment to the user experience, not a boon. So, because they're just, especially when your search is horrendous, Apple. But yeah, so like the App Store is better if they delete several 100,000 crap apps.
That's exactly the thing. I mean, like, the search is a massive angle to this. Like, so the other side, as we said at first, like they're prohibiting spamming your app with keywords that are not related to what it does, and they're setting a cap on 50 characters now. I don't know what the cap was before, but I've seen some pretty long app titles that are like, it's basically like 4 sentences after the first word of describing all the things it does and mentioning every big app. Like, oh, this works for Instagram and Twitter, all the spammers. But a lot of this, like, these things wouldn't be as big of a problem in the App Store if the search was better. And so a lot of critics have pointed out, rightly so, that like, these things are nice, but if you just fix the search, like,
it would solve itself. Because the web is full of crap too, but Google manages to find stuff on it.
Exactly. So it is kind of, I mean, on one hand, it's a little bit frustrating that like Apple is kind of jumping through hoops to do things that better search would alleviate. On the other hand, it seems pretty clear that
better search is not coming.
yeah, that Apple just isn't very good at search, especially on the whoever manages App Store search. Like whatever they're doing over there, whatever methods and algorithms they're using, they just can't seem to pull together a really good search. And so if it's not going to happen, then you might as well do things around it to alleviate how crappy it is for people.
Well, they should do both. Like they are, I'm assuming they are doing both, but this is like the easy first thing to do. Like it really is a benefit to like, because the App Store is not the web. Like I just mentioned the web, like the web is just full of crap, and the magic for Google is it finds out the pages that are actually worth you finding, even though millions and millions of pages match whatever you type into the search box, they find the one that is the best match, meaning not just a spammy abandonware, like, but Google doesn't control the web entirely yet, so they can't clean out.
Yeah,
they
Facebook
can't
controls
clean
the other
out
half.
they can't clean out the crappy web pages. But the whole idea behind the App Store, if you had read any story about the App Store in the first few years, your chances of seeing the word curated in the article were very, very high. And what Apple has done with the App Store does not really fit any reasonable definition of curated, because if you were curating any kind of collection of anything, you just wouldn't allow this kind of crap to A, enter in the first place, which they've been getting better about, hey, we don't need any more fart apps, remember that era, right? And B, you wouldn't let it sit there. Curating means realizing that there's 300,000 applications that crash on launch that haven't been downloaded in several years, except for by poor unsuspecting people who get bad results from your terrible search, right? Curating means you've got to clean that crap out. And yes, they should make search better, but you should also do this. Otherwise, don't pretend that you're really curating. All you're really doing is exerting control, but you don't care about the state of the collection. All you care about is like the gate. Like, we don't want to let any apps in that violate our current set of arbitrary rules, but once they're in, whatever. We don't curate the collection. We just curate the door. We're just the bouncer, but once you get in, you can die on the floor and slowly decompose, and we won't even look at you. Maybe that analogy got a little grim in the end, but
yeah, a little bit.
Oh, goodness. And then Apple has also updated their official review guidelines, I guess is what happened. And they've made some clarifications about subscriptions, which is interesting to several people. And Marco, you caught wind of this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people did. Because there's a lot of sites now that basically provide diffs for, like, anytime Apple changes their review guidelines, there's sites now that will just tell you, like, here's what changed. They'll even, like, alert you. Sometimes they'll email you, or they'll tweet about it. It's pretty great services. So anyway, everyone immediately notices that, the review guidelines have had some modifications, and some of it is simple expected stuff to things like sticker pack rules for the upcoming iOS 10 launch. That's probably happening probably next week or sometime very soon. And so that's cool. But then they also basically clarified the auto-renewing subscription rules a little bit, because as we learned early in the summer, right before WWDC, they announced they were bringing subscriptions, basically allowing them for all categories of apps, not just like publications anymore. And it was kind of left vague and unstated, and then later slightly clarified by Phil Schiller on the Talk Show Live, actually, WWDC, about could productivity apps just charge a subscription for updates, and basically, could you charge a subscription for just using the app instead of content that was being delivered or a web service or anything else? And that was left unspecified and vague until yesterday, when they basically said, I forget exactly what they said, but it was a list of things that would be most likely permitted, and they're still a little non-committal, and it's like you have to basically submit and try, but it was always that way. But one of the things in the list of examples that would be permitted was apps that have frequent and substantial updates.
Close, so close. If only there were a way for you to know what that rule said.
Yeah, if only I would have done some homework.
Casey and I are both staring at it, as you say. There's no way to really know what was said exactly. But if it had been in the notes and somehow put into bold text, so
there it is. Look at that.
Exactly which part that you should look at.
Just had to change tabs. We're still in follow-up?
Yes.
No, this should have been moved. This should have moved now.
This is a topic.
This was before the second part of the story came out about the 50 character limit and the whatever. So anyway, this would have been follow-up on, because we were all, at least I was, remember being very angry about this rule, because the written rule and what Phil said seemed to be at odds, and it was like, just make it clear, like, because it doesn't really matter what Phil Schiller says, because you can't submit your app and then say, well, Phil Schiller said this thing I saw at WWDC. Like, that's not how rules work. You have to, like, if you're writing rules, make them as clear as you possibly can. And it was frustrating to me that it didn't seem like Apple had its act together, and we were questioning, like, does that mean that if you make an application for like a productivity app or whatever, and you just offer updates every year or so, like major updates, can you make a subscription to that or not? That's what we all wanted to know. And the clarification and the exact words of the type of things that can allow for subscription pricing are apps that offer consistent substantive updates, which is not particularly precise, but it clearly lays out you don't need to have new game levels or episodic content or anything like that. Just consistent support, consistent updates, and substantive updates. So that's still open to interpretation, but it doesn't say anything about you being a media app, anything about you being a game, anything about you having like a magazine issues or new content. It just merely says you got to update it. Those always got to be consistent, and there has to be something in them. They have to be like not just, I added one tiny little tweak here or one new preference, right? And so I think that's what people wanted. They just wanted to know clearance for like, okay, if I think, and then it's just arguing over what counts as a substantive update. And I think if people do a 2.0 and it's got like if you did a 2.0 and it includes streaming, you'd win that argument with any reasonable person if you were allowed to have it, to say, that's a substantial update. This is a major feature, major new capabilities. And if you had a subscription pricing to Overcast, 1.0 didn't have streaming and 2.0 did, I think everybody, including Apple, would be all thumbs up on that. And that's all we were looking for back when this rule came out, just to understand the scope of subscription, and then we can just argue about the details.
Right. And it still is going to be like, you still have to submit kind of blindly and just hope they allow you to do it. But this at least gives you a pretty good indication that, like, if you're using this responsibly, they will probably allow it.
You can start development. Like, that's the best thing about it. It's like, before you didn't even know whether it was worthwhile to start development. Now you can start development. I feel like if you get rejected, they can say, oh, that's not a substantial enough update. And you can say, okay, well, I'll just work more and add more features. And presumably at some point you could say, now this surely is worthy of a substantial update. And now of course, if you take too long, then your updates are no longer consistent. But I feel like this gives people the cover they need to begin development, which is all anyone really wants to know. Like, am I wasting my time entirely on this? Or if I'm acting in good faith with my understanding of how this works, the language is now on the same page with what Phil Schiller said. And I feel like it should make everybody relax and feel better. He says foolishly before everyone gets rejected for major updates. But we'll see how this works out.
We are also sponsored this week by Casper, an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. Go to casper.com/ATP and use code ATP for $50 towards your mattress. Casper created one perfect mattress sold directly to consumers, eliminating commission-driven inflated prices. The award-winning mattress was developed in-house, has a sleek design, and is delivered in a remarkably small box so you can get it up narrow stairs if need be. And now, in addition to the mattress, Casper also offers an adaptive pillow and soft, breathable sheets. Now, the mattress industry has forced consumers into paying notoriously high markups. Casper is revolutionizing the industry by cutting the cost of dealing with the resellers and showrooms and passing that savings directly on to you. An in-house team of engineers spent thousands of hours developing the Casper mattress. It combines springy latex and supportive memory foams for just the right sink and just the right bounce. And its breathable design sleeps cool to help you regulate your temperature throughout the night. And all this is available at a shockingly fair price. Premium mattresses usually cost well over $1,500, but Casper mattresses start at just $500 for a twin, $750 for a full, $850 for a queen, and $950 for a king. And these are made in America. Casper has also made buying mattresses online easy and completely risk-free, with free delivery right to your house, free returns also, within a 100-night home trial period. So this is what you can get it, you can sleep on it for 100 nights, and if you don't love it, you can call up, they will come pick it up at your house and give you a full refund. Casper understands the importance of truly sleeping on a mattress before you commit to buying it, especially considering you're going to be spending a third of your life on it. Now, get yours today and try it for 100 nights in your own home with free delivery and free returns with home pickup, completely risk-free. Go to casper.com/ATP and use code ATP for $50 towards your mattress. Thanks to Casper for sponsoring our show.
John posted a week ago a collection of scans, I presume, or perhaps pictures of old artwork that he had done, generally speaking, as a kid. I found this fascinating, and we'll put links to all these pieces in the show notes. Basically, it was on John's Instagram account, profile, whatever you call it. I had known, John, that you fancied yourself a bit of an artist when you were a kid, and I thought that meant that your artistic skills were better than just stick figures, which puts you ahead of almost everyone I know. Then I see all these pictures and I realize, holy crap, like I don't know if you knew this, but you could like really, really draw really, really well.
Yeah, they were really good.
So FYI, that's a thing.
It's like you don't read anything that I write. It's like the first hypercritical thing that I wrote. What's the first line of that? It's a Goodfellas reference even. It's a double whammy.
Well, we knew from following you and reading and listening to your stuff, we knew that you used to be some kind of artist, but we didn't know like the degree or what you drew really. All we knew is that you had said that you had done it for a while and you were too critical about it and you couldn't get over how critical you were of your own work.
No, you got to reread that to understand.
Yeah,
again,
probably.
The point of that thing was, yes, in the beginning was, as far back as I can remember, blah, blah, blah. I was told I want to grow up to be an artist. And then you read the whole thing, you realize, like, why didn't I do that? It's because my actual skill wasn't artistic talent, which is why I didn't pursue it. My actual skill was being able to draw something and look at it and know what was wrong with it. And then you just fix it and you just repeat that process. And if you just keep repeating it, the picture gets better and better the longer you work on it. But that's not how real artists work. Well, they kind of how they work. But anyway, I realize my own limitations.
In all fairness, you have made a very good living by being a complainer professionally.
Exactly. If you're going to look at where are you going to make more money, drawing pictures drawing copies of other people's pictures or complaining about stuff. Apparently, complaining about stuff is much more lucrative.
Well, if you're good at it, and you are really good at complaining about stuff,
I got a lot of practice.
To be good at complaining about stuff, you can't just complain a lot about it. You have to be able to complain well about it, and that's where you are so good at complaining well. Anybody can complain. I complain all the time, but I'm not nearly as good at it as you are. You are a professional, top-notch, world-class complainer about anything.
You need to get the practice I messed it up. Complaining Carnegie Hall. Practice, kid.
Wow.
You don't even know that saying? I mangled it too much. It was unrecognizable. I apologize. I'm an old man.
Oh, my goodness. So anyway, I don't have too much more to say about these other than I genuinely was dumbfounded at how good they were, because I expected it to be stick figures plus, if you will. And that's not a new underscore app. What I mean by that is, just the next level
anyway.
up from, not yet anyway.
I would love to see that app, actually.
That would be pretty awesome. It'll be like pinpoint / bugshot, but with underscore spin on it. So I thought it was just going to be better than your average, 12 or 15-year-old or what have you, but which I guess, yes, this was, but these were way better than your average 12 to 15-year-old. I remember vividly when I was, I don't know, in second or third grade, which is younger than what we're talking about, I had freehand drawn a picture of Garfield the cat and done, if I may say so, an extraordinarily impressive job of it. This is my crowning achievement as an artist. In fact, it's pretty much my only achievement as an artist. And I would show all my classmates as a first or second grader what this was. And they would all be like, oh, you just traced that. And how do you fix this problem when you're in first or second grade? And I've got to have this somewhere, but it'll take me 10 years to dig it up. What I did to fix this problem of, oh, you just traced that, is I wrote in big, very thick letters in all caps, I did not trace this, next to the picture of Garfield.
That's what most great artists put on their things, actually. If you look, it's there, and it's very fine print.
But anyway, I was stunned by how good these were, and I'm really, really genuinely impressed by them, and I want to see more of them. So find some more and post them if you please.
My attic is full of this crap. But like I said in the hypercritical article, the secret to all this stuff is, first of all, as I stated, and I think every single description on Instagram for these things, almost all these things are from another, direct copies of a painting or a poster or something that was, probably on my wall from something. I didn't do these aren't originals, right? Even the ones that are just of random people are taken from people from magazines or a composite of pictures in magazines. But most of them are just exactly direct copies. And all you need to make a perfect copy of a cool poster or painting or a book cover or something else, because I was into all these, fantasy book series or whatever, and I got these calendars with the big posters and stuff. All you need to be able to make an amazing copy of what is already an amazing piece of art is the ability to know when you've drawn something, have I drawn it like that thing over there, or have I messed it up in some way? And that's it, right? And you just repeat that process, and eventually you end up with essentially a larger version of the book cover that you were copying the whole time. And the barrier most people have to doing that is somewhat artistic ability, but mostly they will draw what they think is they see in the book cover, and then they will look up at the book cover and look down at what they've drawn on their giant poster-sized piece of paper and think, yeah, that's about right, and they'll just continue. And if you do that repeatedly, you end up with this terrible misshapen blob that only looks vaguely like what was in the book cover, and it doesn't look good. So you got to draw what's actually on the book cover. You have to know when you've drawn something, too big, too small, at the wrong angle, and then you too, if you have this one particular skill, can essentially make an amazing copy of some other artist's piece of work and get all the credit for making this great picture. I mean, most of the people who looked at this who know the Dragonlance series recognize these pictures because they're famous pictures from that series made by amazing actual artists, and they drew it from whole cloth from their head because they're actual artists. I was merely a very skilled mimic.
Well, regardless of what you think you were and whether or not you think you were good, I was and remain extremely impressed.
I was good for my age. That's why I put most of these up. Because as I get older, it gets less impressive to do something like this when you're 18, but you do it when you're 13, you're like, that's pretty good for a 13-year-old, even a 13-year-old mimic. I did have some other originals, and you've seen my crappy paintings that are around the house. I mean, painting is obviously much harder, but they're from a similar time period when I'm like late single-digit ages or like getting close into my teens. But yeah, no, these have sentimental value because I had these things all over my walls for my childhood bedroom. So I was just happy to find them in the attic and have them all be intact and like, you know what, I should record these because who knows what will happen to them in the future. And now I've got them in digital form.
Yep. Real-time follow-up from my buddy Spencer. It appears that it is about 10 minutes per meg and a half of MP3 data if you really, really, really break it down.
Well, that's using the HEAAC format.
Thank you, yes. And pretty well compressed. So
our dream of issuing an episode of ATP on 17 floppy disks might actually be reasonably possible.
Indeed.
The theme song's going to sound like crap.
Yes, it will.
And then you have to find someplace to buy floppy disks in bulk.
And a drive to write them all.
I've got you covered there.
Oh, yeah.
I actually might have a USB floppy drive around here somewhere. I did have one very recently, and I don't know what I did with it, but I might be able to help out. Regardless, iCloud storage has a new option now. There's now 2 terabytes for $20 a month. That's cool, I guess.
Yeah, before it was capped out at 1 terabyte, and that's actually the plan that Tiff and I have for our giant photo libraries, and that's nice. However, before, like if you needed more than 1 terabyte, probably for photos, you basically just couldn't. There was no option. Now there is. Now you can go to 2 terabytes, which is nice. Twice the money, twice the space. Okay, still, I think it's not insanely competitive on that pricing, but it's not too terrible, and it's nice to have the option.
Yeah, as you pointed out, if you don't have the option, you just feel terrible. My brother was in this situation with his photo library. He has a similar size Sony camera to me, but he got his many years ago, and he has multiple kids, and he shoots everything in RAW. He was over a terabyte. I was like, how can you be over a terabyte? Your oldest kid is like 3, but he takes a lot of pictures, and RAWs are really big. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he was over a terabyte, so he couldn't use the iCloud Photos library. And he just had to find other things to, other ways to back up his stuff. And it was, it's like, Jesus, kind of a shame. Like, there's no amount of money he could give to Apple to say, please just take my photos. And now, finally, they offer a 2 terabyte option. So I excitedly sent him an iMessage and said, hey, you can finally upload your photo library. He said, no, after the summer, I'm over 2 terabytes too.
My solution is actually very simple.
Delete photos.
Anything that is being shot by a real camera first goes into Lightroom. And Lightroom is where I do all the picking, all the editing. Then when I'm done with like processing an event, I export all those as very high quality JPEGs into Photos app. And that's so because like basically a RAW never goes into Photos because Lightroom is better at it, first of all, and also just for again these space reasons of syncing these to all the devices, even thumbnail or not, and then speed, and then catalog size, and iCloud limits of space like this. So that kind of system is much more cumbersome, but does result in a way better photos experience. With the bonus that when I import an event into Photos, because I've already picked all the crappy photos out and have only exported perfectly processed awesome ones, it looks like it does in Apple commercials and demos where all the pictures are perfect. Because normally, if you look at my raw Lightroom library before everything gets picked through and edited, you have a million pictures of the same thing where I was trying to get exactly the right shot. Half these are blurry or misexposed or whatever else, and it does not look anything like the Apple commercials. But my Photos library actually looks pretty close a lot of the time because it is only receiving the edited ones.
This is another example where it seems like Apple doesn't quite understand how at least some set of its users use its products. Because I think everybody who is even remotely into photography or has kids and likes to take pictures of them ends up with exactly like you said, a photo library filled with tons of pictures. Some of them are just a mess, and then in the good ones, there's it's not like you're in even if you're not in burst mode, you take 50 pictures of the kid blowing out the candles to try to get the one shot, right? Everybody does it. That's how you take. That's the secret to photography is take a ton of pictures, then hopefully you'll find one good one out of 1,000, and eventually, if you're really good, one good one out of 500, right? But you still have all those pictures, and I guess the smart thing to do is to delete the other ones. But if you have any sort of pack rat tendencies, you're well, even though these aren't the best picture, maybe it's someday I'll want to look back on the one where they make a funny face or whatever. You don't want to, there's the really excellent pictures that graduate to could appear in an Apple ad, but there's kind of mediocre ones that are still endearing. I have lots of pictures of my kids making funny faces that you'd never see in an Apple ad, or maybe it's even a little bit out of focus as they were running out of the frame, but it's a funny scene or something. I don't want to delete those, right? But you do want to have a photo library that is just the good ones. I do that with the favorites feature, which is, putting the hearts in them or whatever. But imagine if they had something that supported Marco's workflow, which I would do if it was all within one app, which is upload the RAWs, go through them, sort them out, pick the ones that you really like, do the adjustments, burn down to JPEG, and then hide everything that doesn't make the cut. I guess they would still be forced to allow you to upload everything for backup purposes, but it would sure make browsing a lot easier if you didn't have to choose between delete forever and ever and ever, and mostly don't show those. And I know they have the ability to hide pictures, and again, they have favoriting and stuff like that, so they kind of give a hybrid solution, but the fact that Marco has to use two apps to do what I think is a very reasonable workflow is kind of a shame. And the 2 terabyte option for $20, it's Apple, I know not a lot of people do this, but technologically speaking, and financially speaking, and business practice speaking, it's not that much harder to offer 3 terabytes for 30 and 4 terabytes for 40. I can keep going with this crazy sequence. And I don't know how much your storage costs. Hell, put it on a different curve that's not linear. But either way, I bet there are people out there, I know one of them, with libraries that are bigger than 2 terabytes, and they will pay you more money for more storage. I know that's weird sounding, but it will happen. So it would be great if Apple didn't wait another 2 years before they offer the 3 terabyte option. For more money, Apple.
Well, I don't see my 2 app solution changing anytime soon, because for this to change realistically anytime soon, you would either need the Photos app to really have more pro style editing controls and mechanics and workflows possible, which it really still doesn't. It is better than iPhoto used to be, but not good enough for really pro editing, and it seems like Apple is also not very interested in making it so. Or you'd have to have Lightroom get a lot better at cloud stuff. And given Adobe's history there, they've tried a Lightroom-like or directly Lightroom cloud service something like 3 or 4 times by now, and they've all had really big flaws and really big problems. So I think both of those are unlikely to be solved in the foreseeable future. So this is left undone, and I will be using 2 apps for a very long time, as probably a lot of other people do. Or they just put everything in Lightroom and don't touch Photos.
Fair enough. We still have predictions for next week's event to cover, but there's been a big brouhaha about tax stuff with Apple in Ireland, and we should attempt to briefly cover it. Kids, this is when you look at the time count and see exactly how long this chapter lasts. So the short version, which was actually summarized really, really well in a Vox article that we'll have in the show notes, or an article on Vox, I should say. The short version, as I understand it, is the European Union, which has some amount of governing power in general over Ireland as a member of the European Union, although they have no power over Ireland's taxing rules and situation, has come to the conclusion that Apple and Ireland have some sort of backroom deal that is beneficial to Apple, and that's against the non-competitive rules of the European Union. So guess what? Apple owes somebody, I guess Ireland, owes Ireland 13 billion euros, something to that effect. Uninterestingly, Apple says no freaking way. But interestingly, Ireland is saying no freaking way, which you would think, here it is. They are set up. They are alley-ooped. That's a basketball thing, Marco. They have been given the alley-oop for 13 billion euros, and they're saying no thank you. And it appears that the super simple explanation for that is they don't want to appear unfriendly to the many corporations that have based their European operations out of Ireland, because Ireland is the Delaware of Europe for Americans. And so that's the extraordinarily abridged summary. My 2 cents on it, I don't feel like Apple has done anything wrong, but I also am not so sure that these laws are really correct as written. I think both the American laws about money earned elsewhere and repatriating that money seem kind of backwards and messed up. The Irish laws, from an outsider's point of view, seem like maybe they should be a little more aggressive on collecting taxes. But from what little I've read on this, and admittedly it has not been a lot, it doesn't feel to me like Apple has done very much wrong. They just haven't exactly been forthcoming with stuff that maybe morally they should have paid, even if legally they didn't have to. So, Marco, it appears you have some thoughts on this. Go ahead.
I'll make mine quick, because the more I learn about this, the less I have to say about it, basically, because it's very complicated. And there's multiple sides of this. I think there's like the European politics side of it, which that's politics. Who cares? It isn't really a tech topic. Then there's the like U.S. basically tax haven side of it, where you have companies that if they divert all their international sales to international subsidiaries and don't bring the cash back into the U.S., they basically can pay no U.S. tax on it. So Tim Cook is going around basically like obviously taking advantage of all these same things that most big companies do. And I think they are honestly, morally a little tricky or worse, but that is what's legal. And so there are these giant loopholes and workarounds in our tax code that allow big companies to do this. So the big companies do it. Tim Cook, as the CEO, is basically responsible for doing this. Like, if he didn't do stuff like this, if Apple didn't use all the same tax-saving schemes as other big companies do that are perfectly legal, at least in the U.S., ignoring the European politics side of this for now, if Apple didn't do all the same things, the shareholders would have Tim Cook's head, because he'd be basically throwing away billions of dollars. So so basically, as long as these things continue to be the legal way to do things in the U.S. that all other big companies do, Apple has to do them as well. Otherwise, Tim Cook would be fired or sued. So, they have to do it. However, I don't believe that they have to do as much campaigning as Tim Cook does about how the U.S. must change its tax code to basically give them a huge tax break to bring that money back in. So the summary of this basically is that if you keep the money offshore, you don't have to pay U.S. tax. If you bring it back into the U.S. from your international subsidiaries, you have to pay U.S. tax on it, minus whatever you paid in foreign tax. So the idea is you don't have to end up paying like double tax. You just have to pay at least the U.S. tax, and if the foreign tax is higher, that's your deal with the foreign government to handle. But if you end up like you have to pay something. And Apple basically is paying no tax on all their European earnings, and so that's the high level overview. I apologize if I got any of these details wrong. And Tim Cook is going around in all these public statements and things, basically campaigning Washington and the public to support him in this effort to have corporate tax reform to let them bring in this international money into the U.S. at what appears to be the goal of a substantially reduced tax rate. And me, as a person who makes money worldwide but pays all my taxes in the great state of New York, I think that's BS. I think if the companies can do all these little tricks and stuff by basically applying lots of accountants and lawyers and loopholes to save themselves billions of dollars, well, that's, I hope the government fixes that, because that seems like a poor allocation of the tax burden. But for Tim Cook personally to use like the same level of energy that he was using for the FBI fight for our privacy to now be to basically trying to have that same energy being spent on, I demand that we be able to bring our money back into the U.S. and to get a discount on our taxes. No, that's not morally defensible. It's just not. So I don't support Tim Cook in that. I think, if they want to do the same loopholes, fine. But don't go like, complaining in public that the U.S. needs to allow you to bring your money back in and not pay your share of taxes on it. No, you should pay your taxes the way all of us pay our taxes.
Well, he's not the same as the rest of us. So I think most of his defense, because he's the head of a giant multinational corporation that sells physical goods overseas, right? And you're not doing that. But I think most of his defense seems to be centered around the idea that has been put forth by the European Union and everything, that two things, that Apple did something like wrong, like they're not going to say illegal because it wasn't illegal, but like sneaky and wrong. And that it was sneaky and wrong back then, and therefore you owe all those back taxes. Like it was, even though you and Ireland agreed, at the time that you agreed on it, you didn't know this, but it was against our anti-competitive laws of the European Union. So we want you to pay, not from now on, not going forward, because I feel like that's between the European Union and Ireland in terms of deciding, like, are some Irish tax laws in violation of the anti-competitive thing? Because basically they don't want like one country, like the Delaware of Europe, to be able to attract all of the economic activity, starving out the other countries. Like they're trying to keep the countries from undercutting each other and hurting each other. It's supposed to be a big, European Union. You're not supposed to have one country, one stronger country crushing another one with the power of its tax subsidies for big companies or whatever. So that's what the EU is trying to do. And I feel like that's between EU and Ireland to figure out what the deal is there. But I think Apple's defense is, we're not a sneaky criminal. And if you've decided, if you guys working out amongst yourselves, Ireland, the European Union, whatever you got to do, if you decide that going forward this isn't going to be the deal anymore, change your laws, we'll comply with them, but we don't want to pay you back taxes on $13 billion. And the U.S. laws being like you pay the difference in taxes, I feel like it is kind of weird for physical goods that you sell in a particular place. Like tax that where if you sell something, I mean, it's sneaky that you sell something in France and you get taxed for it in Ireland. So that's still kind of messed up. But the idea that the only reasonable tax system is no matter where you sell your things in the entire world, because the corporate headquarters is in the United States, that you pay United States tax rates, I think that is like, you need some amount of diversity in the world. You need to allow countries to have lower tax rates to encourage economic activity. Countries out of the EU. I'm sure there's plenty of countries elsewhere in the world that are not in the EU and they're not in the US that have lower corporate tax rates, right? Or like Hong Kong or Singapore or whatever. I don't know. Singapore is a bad example, but you can't say, like, the US law is basically, I don't care what your tax laws are. If you are a US corporation and you make money, then we tax you at the U.S. rate. I don't care if we're taxing you on a sale that was made from a store in some other country to a person in another country. I don't care about that. I want your money because you're a U.S. corporation. Because I feel like that's not a great system, and it could lead to situations where people don't want to incorporate in the United States and they incorporate in the global Delaware instead or whatever. But anyway, Tim Cook's sort of anger about this, I feel like mostly has been motivated by the injustice of having to pay essentially back taxes that are not owed. It's as if the IRS says, the tax law that's been in effect for the past decade, we decided that was actually not a good tax law, so we're changing it. And by the way, pretend like it was in effect for the past 30 years or so, and you owe us all back taxes on it. So he's going against that because I feel like that's just not fair, right? Who knows if that would actually happen, but that's what he's complaining about. And the idea that they're sneaky or wrong, which is borderline because it's pretty sneaky. Like everything having to do with tax avoidance is pretty sneaky. I don't think Tim Cook was responsible for setting up these sneaky laws, but on the other hand, it was like sneaky between a corporation and a government. Like, again, Ireland was all for it because they want their little 0.005%. 0.005% of a hodillion dollars is way better than 35% of $0 because Apple doesn't do its thing in Ireland anymore. So it's kind of gross and kind of sneaky between Apple, but I really don't think saying that they owe back taxes makes all that much sense unless, like, I don't know what the European Union process, unless there's some sort of process where they can prove that as it turns out, that Ireland tax law was always against the EU charter, and then you got to work something out. And as for repatriating the money, again, I think it's kind of weird that the U.S. wants all the taxes to be at the U.S. rate no matter where you sell things. I don't feel like that's a scalable solution to a world economy. But if you're going to do that, yeah, like I don't think Tim Cook saying we would like to bring that money back, but give us a lower rate. He can say that all he wants, but I don't think it's good. Everyone wants to have lower taxes. And if you're a corporation saying, oh, we totally bring that money back, it's like holding the money ransom, like we'll bring these trillions back. Just give us a lower rate. And I feel like that's not going to go anywhere. And I'm not quite sure why Tim Cook is lobbying for that much, because honestly, does he need that money back into the U.S.? Or is that just trying to be like an olive branch who we totally bring that money back? Because I can imagine the U.S. lowering the rate and then Apple going, nah, we'll stick with 0.5%. Thanks a lot about changing that law and everything, but 0.005% versus that. I don't know the details of why he would want to bring it back specifically. But as for the shareholders or people getting angry at Tim Cook, he does that all the time in terms of telling the shareholder, if you don't, we know that this is not the best way to make money, but if you don't like it, the sustainable energy or whatever, maybe human rights. Many times he has said to investors, if you're in it for the short term and you just want us to do this thing, just get out of the stock. There's plenty of other stocks you can buy, right? So I think it's totally within reason for him to take a similar ethical stand on tax law here. He just hasn't chosen to. And I think there's two parts. One, I don't think this is the same category as, I don't think really is a moral issue. Maybe it's a mild ethical issue, but morally speaking, the environment and human rights are way bigger causes than arguing over whether tax dollars go to the EU or to the US or whatever. It's not quite the same thing. It's just shuffling paper around. And I know there are consequences of all that and so on and so forth, but I think it's hard to draw a really straight line between arguments between these giants about tax law and things like the environment, which is doesn't recognize borders and is shared by the entire planet and has irreparable effects. And then it just seems like him personally and Apple as a corporation don't feel like they are on the wrong side of this. If they felt like they were on the wrrong side of this and needed to change something, they would change it and they would go to the shareholders and say, if you don't like us doing this, then fine. But I think you don't get to be the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world by doing things saying I know our tax rate is X, but I just don't feel it's ethically right for us to pay that low. We should pay some extra taxes this year. There's a limit to how far people's minds can bend to, or rather the other way. I think your mind eventually bends to the idea that voluntarily paying more taxes than you need to is not a good business plan. And so I think that's where they're at. And maybe in his deathbed, Tim Cook will say, you know what, I should have brought that money back and just pay the taxes so that the bridge that collapsed with my loved one on it didn't collapse, because America doesn't know how to fund infrastructure anymore. And if only I had given $20 trillion more, it would have helped. But I don't know. I feel like it's, he's a company man, he's a good CEO, and this does not rise to the level of human rights or the environment.
Well, then that's why it kind of rubs me the wrong way, how much Cook is kind of trying to bring the public to support him on this. He's kind of bringing this fight into the public with his statements. Both the Ireland thing,
doesn't care, though.
Right? Both
public
the Ireland thing and the corporate tax rate, repatriation thing, and it just seems like this is just one of those reminders, that for all the good things they do and for all the good people there, Apple is still a giant corporation, and the CEO of it is still the CEO of a giant corporation, and one of his main jobs is trying to pay as little tax as possible and trying to do all sorts of tricks. And it's a little bit weird. It's only a little bit weird that Cook seems to not sense how bringing this to the public is probably not a good use of that political capital.
But he's not. I don't think he's bringing it to the public to convince them over to Apple's side. He's doing damage control. What he doesn't want, if he doesn't say anything, what comes out of this is just the repeated idea that Apple cheats on its taxes and doesn't pay its fair share. And that's what he's coming out to say, is we don't cheat, we're not doing things against the law, we pay our fair share. That's always his message. And if he wasn't being attacked, because if he said nothing and just said well, whatever, the public doesn't care about this, eventually it would just be common knowledge that Apple cheats on its taxes and doesn't pay its fair share, right? And that's why he feels like he has to go to the public. Now, I think in general the public doesn't care about that much anyway, but I still think if he didn't come out and argue strongly against it, Fast forward 5 years, and you make a joke about Apple not paying taxes, and everyone will go, oh yeah, Apple, those are the company that doesn't pay taxes. When in reality, all corporations don't pay taxes because they all use these loopholes. But only Apple would be getting the bad PR for it, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's why he is so vocal about it. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a campaign to convince the world to call your congressman to let Apple repatriate $1 trillion. Like, I don't think that's in anybody's head.
Our final sponsor this week is Eero. Our homes are coming online. Speakers, thermostats, light bulbs, front door locks, security cameras, everything. And increasingly, services like Netflix, Hulu, and Spotify are where we turn for home entertainment. Wi-Fi is the foundation for it all. It is probably the technology we depend on most outside of the smartphone, which itself does depend on Wi-Fi. The core utility of the 21st century home is Wi-Fi. Now, Wi-Fi, despite this importance, is broken. Imagine if electricity didn't reach certain parts of your house, or were like intermittent or weak in others. Now, that would be ridiculous for electricity, but this is the status quo for Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is just not reliable enough when you just have one router in your house. Now, Eero was designed to change all this. Eero manufactures a single device, a small, elegant box about the size of an Apple TV. And with their dead simple iPhone app, you put Eeros throughout your entire home. You can have as many as you want. You can have just one, but what you really should have is like 2 or 3. And their app makes it really simple. Here's what you do. You plug the first one into your internet connection, and it acts as a router. And then you plug in the other Eero or Eeros anywhere else in your house that you want more coverage. You try to spread them out, and the app will help you do this. Try to spread them out in a way that's effective, kind of covers the whole house. They all talk to each other, and they form this giant mesh where it just covers your entire house on Wi-Fi. And the other ones that aren't the first one don't have to be plugged into like Ethernet or any other kind of internet connection. They just need power, and they communicate wirelessly with the other ones. It is really great, and it is so much easier to cover multi-room houses, any kind of large apartment, any house really, large areas. It is so much better covering it with multiple access points than trying to get just one super high-powered one. We all know this. The Wi-Fi industry has tried to sell us these like routers that have like 16 antennas on them, and they say, oh, this one this time will cover your whole house. And it never does, because that doesn't work. So Eero changes all this in a really simple, easy way. It is so easy to use. Their app is great. Their service is great to help you manage all this stuff. And it's just incredibly effective. So check it out. There's so much. I can't even fit it all in one read. There's parental controls. There's app notifications. There's so much cool stuff. They recommend about 1 Eero per 1,000 square feet, so the average house will need 2 or 3 of them. A 3-pack is a good starting point for most people, and if you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can always return 1 or more of your Eeros if you end up not needing it or not liking it. So check it out. The Eero Wi-Fi system is currently rated at 4.4 stars on Amazon with over 750 reviews. People are really liking this thing. Go to Eero.com and use promo code ATP at checkout to get overnight shipping. Thank you very much to Eero for sponsoring our show.
So as we record, it is Friday, the 2nd of September. On the 7th, which is this coming Wednesday, convenient for our recording next week, actually. I didn't even think about that. On the 7th, Apple will be releasing ostensibly the new version of the iPhone, which may or may not be called the iPhone 7. It may or may not be announcing a new Apple Watch, and may or may not be releasing new MacBook Pros. Thoughts on what's happening here? I think we can all agree that there will be a new iPhone 7. I was sorry, I shouldn't say that will be the name, just that there will be a new phone. It sounds to me like it's pretty much a given that it will not have a headphone jack. I think I'm okay with that. I'm not thrilled by it, but I'm not devastated by it either.
Well, this was the genius of Apple's PR campaign over basically the entire spring and summer of what seems, in retrospect, and even seemed a bit like at the time, what seemed like a very good controlled leak campaign to set expectations accordingly and get all the anger out slowly over the whole summer. So because we started hearing pretty clear rumors about there being no headphone jack from pretty well-known sources, like pretty good publications a long time ago. So we've had the whole summer to get all mad about it. And now we just kind of all accept it as, okay, well, yeah, this fall's iPhone, there's no headphone jack. And had we not known that ahead of time by so long and had so much time to get mad about it and then finally accept it, that all that anger would have blown up next week. at the same time that Apple's using a design for the third year in a row for the first time. And by the way, if I may say again, not a particularly great design. So like imagine the anger that would have played and like the negative press coverage that would have had on the product that now probably won't happen as much. I still think there will be some, but I think it won't be nearly as much as it would have been if we hadn't been able to stew about it from like Bloomberg and rumor sites for the entire summer.
Yeah, they did the best they could with that, but there's a limit because I think almost everybody who goes to buy this new iPhone will not know that it has no iPhone jack. So even though we are, and the tech media, which is really all Apple could do, who's interested in this story at all months before it comes out? The tech media and us who read the tech media. So that's all they can do, right? So we're kind of getting over it and learning to deal with it and had all the think pieces about it and so on and so forth. But we are a tiny, tiny sliver of the huge number of people who buy iPhones. And pretty much, to a first approximation, every single person who goes in to buy the new iPhone in, the first month or two is going to be like, wait, where's the headphone jack? Until the story goes on your local news and USA Today and all sort of mainstream media that people watch. And eventually, the public will know. What Apple has spared is the incredible outrage that would have been if it was a surprise to us, like Marco said. Like, if the tech press also was blindsided by it, it would just be way, way bigger. But I still think there will be a fairly substantial, like, speaking of the Tonight Show, monologue-worthy gags about the new iPhone not having a headphone port among the regular people who don't follow exactly what the new iPhone is going to be months in advance, and they'll learn about it when the product is announced and when it's released, like everybody else. And, and they'll get over it in their own time. So I think Apple did the best it could with the PR campaign, but we'll see if, this is if their timing is right on this, or if the future, time is on their side, or they're the wave of the future as they have been so many other times. I can tell you that the other day I tried to plug my headphones into the lightning port on my iPhone 6. Obviously, I've been stewing in the idea that there won't be a headphone port for a long time, but I got so far as that I touched the two of them together. That's how far I got. I didn't start pressing, but I touched the two of them together. And it's mostly because I've been thinking for, 6 months now or whatever it's been about what it might be like to have lightning headphones. And several months ago, I think I sort of came, my personal piece with this issue is that, look, all I ever connect to my iPhone are the ear pods that came with it. If it comes with ear pods that I can still plug into the phone,
which it will,
fine. Then like, how does this personally, just me personally, not saying this is a good idea for the product, so on and so forth, just for me personally, I really don't think this change will affect my life, except if this means that the extra number of plugs and unplugs wear out my lightning port faster. But other than that, I think my life won't change. I'm also very interested in the, rumors of the wireless, ear pod things, and like, I'll try them out. I'll probably buy a pair of those and give Apple some money, because I'm kind of fascinated by that idea. But yeah, I don't know how much they're going to cost.
It's going to be $100.
I got some person sent one to the show, like someone who works for like this headphone company whose name I can't remember. I think it was like 801 something. Anyway, but they're not wireless. They have a wire from one ear to the other.
That's what most of them do, yeah.
And on that wire is the little clicker thing. And I know they're not wired in the same way, but that wire going from one ear to the other, even though it gives me a place for the clicker, still feels weird. Like, it doesn't feel like they're wireless to me. I know they are. Like, there's no connection to my jacket pocket and the thing, but it still feels strange to me. So the rumors I see of Apple potentially having ones that literally don't have any wires on them, I might give that a try if it's an Apple thing. But yeah, I think we've covered the headphone jack and the iPhone 7, as has been the case with most iPhones for the past many years. We feel like we know every single thing about it. We feel like we've seen pictures of the actual phone. We know. The only thing we never know is like, all right, A10 system on a chip will be better. How much better? Because that's the type of stuff that doesn't leak, because no one's slicing the top off the chip and analyzing the die before the thing. But
well, there was that one leak Geekbench thing that showed it being about 50% faster, which I don't know if that was real, but they have made jumps of that magnitude before, so it is certainly plausible that it might be 50% faster, which would be cool.
Yeah, and we get those those type of rumors like, is it going to be way faster or a little bit faster? And this one seems like another way faster one, but we'll see. But I think that is it's kind of boring for these Apple events, especially like the next year event, the 10th anniversary, super thin phone with like no home button and the Touch ID in the screen and the edge to edge, like all those rumors that we're already getting. It'll be kind of sad if we know everything about that one before it comes out, because I would like to be surprised again. But it just seems, alas, not to be possible when you sell so many hundreds of millions of these things, it's impossible for the parts not to leak. And for the September event, like that's the headline attraction. Every single rumor story has been saying, don't look for Macs, don't bother. It's not the type of event. So I'm already prepared not to see anything about Macs. I'm fine with the Macs coming out at a later date.
See that?
You can't let it go?
No, I mean, everyone is basically saying, like, everyone's basically reporting as fact now, so which sounds a lot like controlled leaks. They're basically reporting as fact that, like, there won't be Macs announced. That'll come later, which, of course, Macs are always coming later. So Linux will be great next year. So I'm not ready to let that go yet, if only because... So we're pretty sure there's not going to be iPads at this event. And the phone updates are going to be not that major, like, not taking a lot of stage time. So what the heck is going to fill the time in the event? Like, if this is going to be like their big fall event, but it sounds like Apple Watch 2 is also pretty minor.
Yeah, but two minor things. First of all, how long they can go on about any phone. They'll be showing you a million pictures from the dual camera. They'll be showing you all the graphs, and they'll probably show iOS 10 features again. And just like, it will take a while. And then the watch, this is the first and only significant update to the watch besides the new colors and new bands. They're going to spend a long time on that, especially if we have these tips not from the tipster, these are non-tipster tips. So who knows what the provenance is? That could have been even more fabricated than stories about USB hubs.
Oh no! Sick burn.
Yeah, this is the Watch 2 GPS, which would be a big deal if it was true, because all we've been hearing from random rumors over the past year or so is that Apple has learned that pretty much the most important function of the Apple Watch for most customers is fitness related, and people are still wearing Fitbits and stuff. So, if you have GPS on the watch itself, that really changes the story in terms of applications to keep track of your exercise and do running if you want to do it without your phone, if that's the thing that people want to do. Improve waterproofing, which is hard to imagine because Craig Hockenberry has taken something like 150 swims in the ocean with his watch and it's still going strong. So I think the waterproofing is already pretty good. The Apple Watch 1 will stick around at a lower price, which is totally a Tim Cook thing to do, but on the other hand, sounds crazy to me, but who knows?
Please let the CPU die as fast as possible.
Yeah. More health sensors did not make it again. This is the persistent rumor. When the first watch came out, everyone's like, oh, Apple wanted to do like blood oxygenation, but they couldn't because of FDA, blah, blah, blah. And second watch, same set of rumors. Oh, Apple wanted to do more health stuff, but they couldn't because there's lots of regulations. So you just run that rumor forever, because if there's never any new health features, like, yeah, they just missed it. Apple wanted to do it, but couldn't. It's not, show me the features or don't. And potential for an improved model with more health sensors in 6 months. But it could be pushed until Christmas 2017. So, yeah, you're right. Like the Apple Watch 2 rumors, even if you believe every single one of these tips, GPS, I think that's pretty big. If they can make it thinner, but I doubt they will, that's kind of big. But I fully believe that Apple can make a full presentation out of new line of phones and new line of watches and not mention anything about the Mac.
Yeah, and let's not forget that we also have watchOS 3, which I know was covered at WWDC, but it's a big change. And especially if the watch sales have been kind of meh, which is what everyone seems to think, whether or not that's true, who knows, then they're going to want to really do a pretty significant dog and pony show about watchOS 3. There could be a video game demo or two on iOS 10 with the new hardware. I mean, what you're saying, Marco, is how could ATP have an episode of more than 20 minutes when there's nothing going on in the middle of the summer? Well, we always find a way, and Apple can too. Going back a step, though, a couple things. One, I would love for my Apple Watch to be thinner. This is the only Apple device that I can think of that I really, really, really want to be thinner. Very much so. And I think that there's plenty of room to give, even while keeping the same band compatibility, which I think they will, and I think that's important. I think there's plenty of room for them to give on the thickness. And if the battery life stays roughly the same, and to be honest, if the performance only gets a little bit faster, I'm okay with that, but I would love for this thing to be thinner. I have another question I want to ask you guys, but Marco, it sounds like you have some thoughts on this.
Oh, I'm laughing every time I see, like, the recent rumor is that the battery for the watch got like 30% bigger. And they achieved this in roughly the same size casing by making some of the screen components smaller. And it's like, this is the one Apple product that doesn't really need more battery life. Like the 42 millimeter getting a 30% bigger battery life. It already has an amazing battery life.
Well, they said that the battery got 30% bigger, but if you have GPS on it, doesn't mean it gets any better battery life.
Well, that's true. Although, to be fair, and I think this was on Connected where they were talking about, what that is likely to be, or maybe it was Upgrade, where basically, assuming this thing gets GPS, it's probably going to be a lot like the workout mode or something where, you can turn it on, you have to explicitly turn it on when you want it, and it's probably not going to be on the vast majority of the time. You're probably going to have to, really explicitly call it out and say, all right, turn on GPS now.
I think the apps will be able to control. You go for your hour-long run, you start your workout, and your app gets to run the whole time because they have that new feature in watchOS 3 where you get to run during the whole workout, and that will slaughter your battery if you run for an hour or two if they don't give you a 30% bigger battery. So I feel like it'll probably be a wash.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Although it'll be a massive boon for people who don't use GPS. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, this is why, I would love it if Apple basically split the sport features off into the sport model, and also had maybe take the Steel model and make it the little bit dressier one, like the Office one. That's the one you wear to work, or whatever. And if you don't need some of the more advanced fitness features, like some of the more advanced sensors or GPS, maybe you can get a thinner steel watch for a couple $100 more that looks a little bit nicer, and then the sport model, which is most of the ones they're selling anyway, can still get all this big bulky stuff and some of the more fitness stuff because that's what most of its buyers actually want.
So you want a day watch and a night watch. Got it. To go back to the phone, if they go with killing the headphone jack, which it seems pretty much a given, I have seen a rumor that answers this question, but I'm curious what you guys think. And let's start with John. Do you think that they will include some sort of lightning to what is the acronym for the headphone port?
TRRS.
Thank you. A lightning to TRRS adapter. Will that be in the box? Yes or no? John Siracusa.
If I had to put money on it, I would say no, just because I feel like they're going to include earpods with a lightning connector on the end in the box, because they've been so, sort of stingy with the accessories lately. The only thing that's making me question it a little bit is how they would sell the presumed passive no chips required connector for the adapter, because Apple doesn't like to sell things for less than $20. And can they sell that adapter for $10 or $20? It's so tiny. The box, it would be like the size of the old iPod Shuffle Trident stick of gum box, maybe even smaller. I don't know how they sell this in a way, even just thinking of shrinkage, as they call it in the industry, or theft. How can you even have these? Will they have a Tic Tac dispenser that just dumps these things out? That's the only thing that's making. It's they don't sell the pin, the SIM card removal tool, right? They don't sell that separately. Or they also don't give it to you in the box a lot of times with the phone. But that's the type of thing. It's so freaking small and so cheap. How can you sell it separately? And yet they must sell it separately if they don't include it in the box. But I still think that the smart money is on no adapter in the box. But it's borderline.
The chat room is saying exactly what I was going to say to you, which is they sold the MagSafe 1 to 2 adapter, which was $10.
Right. And that was super weird, right? That was super weird and really small and not a normal thing that they do. And also way fewer people need MagSafe 1 to 2 than could potentially be in the market for this adapter. Now, obviously, every third party in the world will also sell this adapter, but they're not Apple. It's weird for Apple to be selling stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, just lightning earpods in the box. Also, as Tipster said in the chat,
even if they include it in the box, they still have to sell it separately because people are going to need more than one.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
I know. It's just a weird product for Apple to sell. I guess if they sell it for $30, it's not weird anymore. But then there'll be some screaming.
I mean, I'm as much of a skeptic and cynic about the Tim Cook era of Apple being super profitable and driving up attachment sales and everything. However, even I don't think it's going to be $30. I think it's going to be either 10 or 20.
I would agree with that. But Marco, do you think it will be in the box? Yes or no?
No. Because, and I think Gruber mentioned this at one point, basically, if they put it in the box, that's kind of an admission that it's necessary, and I don't see them doing that. I see them saying, this is the future.
Up until today, I would have said no freaking way that adapter will be in the box. However, there was a post that I saw earlier today. I'm never going to be able to find the link, and I'm sorry, but there was a post with a picture of it included many different things, but one of the things it included was a list of the things in the iPhone 7 box. I believe it was called iPhone 7, and this was a Korean model. Gosh only knows if it was legit or not, but it said in there lightning-powered earpods. That wasn't the exact phrasing, but something like that, and a lightning to headphone jack adapter in the box, which I would be very surprised if that's the case. I think the same, that it is a position of strength or a strong move not to include it, and it is an admission of weakness if they do include it. I think it's more customer friendly to include it, but that's not generally Apple's style when it comes to these sorts of things. So I'll be surprised if it's in there, but the smoke is saying that it will be.
Well, there is more parallels to Thunderbolt Display than you think, because the whole Thunderbolt Display thing was, all right, so we're selling this thing, and all of a sudden we sell a line of computers that don't work with the little MagSafe thing that's dangling off of it, right? So we have one product, and that product is fine as it is, but we've introduced another product here, like it doesn't match up with the rest of our product line. So now we have to pick one of these products to ship with a thing that says, okay, when you buy this one, you can't. It would be weird to buy a Thunderbolt Display and not to be able to use it with the brand new laptop that you just bought alongside it, because we're selling them simultaneously. Or no matter what order you did it. Say you buy a laptop, then 6 months later, because the Thunderbolt Display has been out for like 800 years before they canceled it. 6 months later, you buy a Thunderbolt Display. You'd be surprised to say, wait, I bought this laptop not that long ago, and now I'm buying a brand new monitor. It doesn't work with it. So Apple wants its products to work together. Well, Apple owns Beats. Say you buy Beats headphones, and then a couple months later, the new iPhone comes out. It feels kind of weird that you just bought this product in an Apple store from basically Apple that you can't use with your just purchased iPhone. I think you just asked me what you thought they would do. I think they should include the adapter in the box, especially if it's passive. And that's why I feel like it's borderline, where it's not the Apple thing to do, but if they were, it's kind of like the bumper case. Like they didn't include the bumper case with the iPhones, but eventually Steve Jobs like, fine, you want bumpers? Free bumpers for everybody. Like it's a nice way to make a problem go away, to have a ready answer when they say, but you took away the headphone port. And it's like, adapter comes in the box. I would still bet against it, but it's a lot closer than I would have thought. Having chewed on this for the past several months, I would not bet super heavily on it, but that's still my bet.
Oh, no, I agree that they should put it in the box for customer sat reasons. They really should, and that would help a lot. Like that would change the story from "you're making us buy new crap" to most people just saying, "Oh, now we have to use this other thing that's in the box," which it's still a crap move, I think, overall, to remove this jack for apparently no need in this generation. But at least that would really change. Like, it would make it so that when you get these things, no matter what kind of headphones you use with your phone, you don't have to buy anything extra just to use your old headphones with your new iPhone. And that is a big satisfaction win at the purchase point. Like it makes it feel like less of like a quote money grab, this phrase I hate that everyone loves so much. Like if they make you spend an extra $20 to adapt your existing headphones to it, people are going to get mad, and they're not going to get mad that it's $20. They're going to get mad that it's like an add-on at all.
Yeah, they're confused. The money grab is the storage. That's the money grab. There's a money grab here, but it's not the headphones.
Yeah, and all the rumors, finally, they're saying now that even 32 is becoming too small, Apple is finally upgrading from 16 to 32 for the baseline storage.
Yay!
Apple's like, we could move to 32, but is 32 painfully small for people? Let's wait another year. And then finally they say, we can move to 32. Is 32 painfully small? It's actually painfully small for a lot of customers. Good, let's move to it. Now it's time.
Yeah, we actually, about a year ago or so, a year and a half, we bought my mother-in-law an iPad Air, or Air 2. It was her first iPad, and we weren't sure if she was going to use it that much, so we only got the base 32 model. They were preparing for a trip and just want to like put videos on, and here I am like juggling, like, all right, we got to download this video for the plane, now we got to go delete this video and try to figure out how to download this video in SD instead of HD, which is not easy. And it's like all this juggling because, like, yeah, 32, it turns out 32 kind of isn't big enough anymore either. So it is definitely time for them to move to 32.
And the thing is, with the storage, I mean, I'm glad that they're moving up from 16, because if it is 16 again, come on, it's getting ridiculous. But, like Google Photos just had that ad, I think, was it a TV ad or an online ad? But anyways, an ad, ridiculing Apple for people who basically own iPhones and take a lot of pictures, and eventually you can't take any more pictures because it says your storage is full.
Yep.
And this is a thing that happens because people take lots of pictures with their phones, and people don't delete their pictures when they're done with them because they, why would I delete them? I want to keep my photos. And Apple has iCloud Photo Library that's supposed to take care of this for you. In practice, as I've seen in person for myself many, many times, the sort of like optimized storage format you automatically does not do it when you want to. You fill it up and you're like, okay, optimized storage now. Like, what signal do you need from me or from the operating system? I am full. I can't fit any. My thing was like, I was trying to import photos into the, like, I'm in the Photos application. I mean, maybe Photos isn't the thing that optimizes storage. Maybe it's the background ubiquity daemon or whatever, who knows? But I'm trying to import. Photos knows I'm trying to import. Photos tells me there's not enough room. I'm like, yeah, but I have the optimized storage thing checked off. Just purge a bunch of old pictures. Like, do it now. And there's no button that says, please free up my disk space by purging pictures, because that's not the Apple way. And so I'm just stuck there staring at it going, well, you won't let me import off this SD card. I had optimized storage checked. Do I just like wait 24 hours to see if you'll, do I import just enough photos to push the disk past its storage limit? Like, in practice, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. But Apple really believes their tech lineup, their bullet points. They're like, oh, well, we have app thinning, and we have, incremental downloads of content, and we have optimizing storage for our photos library and for our movies and iCloud storage and backup. So 16 is actually not that bad. Do you remember that story for the past few years? I think Phil Schiller said it in person. One of the things, like, 16 doesn't seem like a lot, but we have all these amazing technologies for compression and putting the files from your desktop and Mac OS Sierra up to, yeah, you've got all that stuff, but A, you're fighting it back against the tide. Like, people use more storage as time goes on, period. That's just the way it works. And B, that crap doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work when you need it most. When you run out of space, there is no recourse, there's no button to push, and it doesn't magically automatically manage it. What it does to give you is the dialogue that says you're out of space, and people don't know how to deal with that. And then you get the dialogues about you can't fit your backup onto iCloud as you increase the storage. So Apple, in theory, has tech surrounding this that mitigates it somewhat, but in practice, that Google ad was, right on the money. Like, this is a real experience that people had, and what Google is promising, I don't know if they're delivering because I don't use Google Photos for anything other than backup. What Google is promising is, hey, we have essentially exactly the same system, but ours actually works, and we won't give you the out of space, because I imagine Google on the fly, when you're taking a picture, if it doesn't have enough room to store it, it immediately deletes one photo and stores it. Like, it does a better job of what Apple says it's going to do. So, yeah, Apple's cloud and storage situation remains fraught, but if they're finally ready to move it to 32, that's good. If they're getting rid of 64 and it's going to be 32, 128, 256, actually, I think that's actually not that bad, because I feel like 64 should be the minimum anyway, and I like the fact that you have to jump from 32 to 128, but it's going to make Apple's storage pricing tiering look really weird. Like, 32 to 128 is an extra $100.
Yeah, well, but it already did.
Yeah, I know it always looks. Anyway, you just try to think about it. That's where the magic money is made. But we'll see what the tiers are.
Also, some real time follow up. I forgot that my iPad is also 32 gigs. Like, when I ordered my 9.7 iPad Pro in May, I wasn't sure if I would take to the iPad again, because I'd been kind of an iPad skeptic for so long. So I also just got the 32, and that was a big problem when I tried to load up videos on it for the plane ride home from WWDC, and there was basically no space to do anything useful.
I think mine might be as well. I don't have it next to me. Additional real-time follow-up. Panda19 in the chat was able to find the link I was thinking of. It was on Mac Rumors. Looking at this again, I mean, it's super sketchy, but it reads, includes iPhone 7 Plus, earpods with Lightning connector, Lightning to headphone jack adapter, Lightning to USB cable, and USB power adapter. So if it's real, we'll see.
And by the way, speaking of announcements, the alternate show idea I have, because very frequently, I think on the show, we have a pretty bad track record of predicting what's going to be announced. But the alternate theory of what could play out in the show is new iPhone, nothing about Apple Watch, and the new laptops, even though they're not shipping until much later. That is also a show that I can totally envision, because I think that fits into the thing of like, hey, we spent all this time talking about Apple Watch 2 and Apple didn't say a single word about it. I don't think it's likely, but that's the feeling. Usually after we do one of these shows, then I watch the actual announcement and I'm like, that's nothing like what we talked about. We totally got this wrong. Pretty sure there'll be a new iPhone, though.
Well, the question is, like, are they going to have multiple events this fall or not? And I think so far, most of the rumblings point to no, it's a single event again. So if there's only one public event, keep in mind, this is like their whole like holiday shopping lineup that they're debuting here too. So I think the watch has to be a part of it. Like, even if all they have to announce is a relatively minor boost of what if Watch 2 isn't even called Watch 2, or if it's if it's kind of downplayed, it's like, oh, now
it's the new Apple Watch.
Yeah, the new Apple Watch has GPS at the $499 price point, and then the cheaper ones don't have it. However they do it. the watch is going to be there because they're going to have maybe new colors. They're going to definitely have new bands, because it's like bands are seasonal, it's fashion, and lots of wonderful attachment profit sales there. So like, yeah, there's going to be new bands for the fall and the winter. They're going to debut all those at this event. So the only reason they wouldn't is if they're doing another event later in the fall, like right before big shopping season really starts. But I think they're probably not. And if they're not, this event's going to be full of stuff to buy for the holiday season. And if Macs don't fit, that's really sad to me. But I could see there's no chance the watch isn't being mentioned, and there's no chance we aren't getting new bands.
The reason I mentioned like not showing the watch events and showing the laptops or just showing laptops at all, even though they're totally not ready or whatever, is just because the whole OLED strip thing on the keyboard, it just seems like the type of feature that Apple would like to announce in a keynote. I know Jason Snell on Six Color said, they would just do individual press briefings. That's a possibility, which they've done many times before, and that's true. But I feel like they've never done these sort of private embargoed individual press briefings for a feature that so demands a demo and video, like a presentation directly from Apple to the public about this feature. Because normally they would have those briefings about, a new version of the OS that's been seen several times before, but here's the official release, or the first look at a new OS, or new laptops that are better in a couple of ways. But I just feel like Apple should be the one to present whatever this weird new strip thing is, because it is weird. Like, even though PC makers are already doing it and everything, like, it's something I feel like they need to explain to the public in some way. And even if it's not going to ship until like November, it would be great if they put maybe just a 15-inch Pro. Like, just pick one model to explain this whole strip thing, and then dole out the other ones. And it would also save them from the indignity of pretty much missing another generation, like the KB or Kaby Lake, I don't know how to pronounce it, the one that comes after Skylake has been announced, and the laptop chips are coming out and everything. So if Apple waits much longer, by the time they get their brand new Skylake MacBook Pros out, the next one will already be shipping in PCs, and that's not a great look after all the complaints about them being behind. Like, hey, we finally did it, we updated the MacBook Pros. I know Kaby Lake isn't that big of a deal, and people are saying like, oh, the reason they're waiting so long is because they're going to have Kaby Lake. Guys, don't hold your breath.
yeah, because Kaby Lake, like Skylake was announced a long time ago too, and we don't have that yet. Like the Intel's announcements.
I mean, this is the same process. So there's but there's a chance if they wait a really long time for them to ship, but Kaby Lake all it gives you is essentially better hardware decoding of video, which is great, but I don't know how much of that Apple uses, and a clock speed boost, because they have the process allows them to crank it up a little bit, their new FinFET process or whatever, which is all great and good, and Apple should totally use it as soon as they possibly can. But at this point, I would say, even if you're going to be a little embarrassed, just ship what you've got. Ship the freaking Skylake things. Just do it, and then upgrade them to Kaby Lake as soon as you can.
Yeah, because however, like, whatever Apple feels about like whatever's holding this back, the status quo has to be worse of selling these ancient MacBook Pros as new to anybody who needs one right now. Like that's got to be worse than whatever's holding these back. But anyway, who knows? We'll find out. One thing I actually do want to mention before we leave the Mac topic here. The rumor has come out in the last couple days that in addition to the MacBook Pros, there's also a MacBook Air update to USB-C. And I wanted to tie this into something else. There was maybe a few months back, I forget when or who, I think it might have been Ming-Chi Kuo, who said one rumor report from somebody who's actually fairly well sourced that kind of got blown over, that basically said that we're going to see like new MacBook Pros and everything. And they also said there's going to be a new 13-inch MacBook One. And at the time we were like, what? That doesn't make sense. And now there's a rumor that there's going to be a new MacBook Air update to USB-C. So I think this is the same computer they're talking about, and we've heard nothing about this from the tipster. So who knows whether there's anything behind this. But I think this is two rumors about the same thing, that it basically is an update to the MacBook Air, to the 13-inch MacBook Air, maybe only maybe the 11 isn't even included. Maybe it's only an update to the 13-inch MacBook Air, and maybe it goes Retina. Because Apple obviously tried with the MacBook One, and to a large degree succeeded, but not. They tried to replace the MacBook Air line with something even more extreme, even thinner, even lighter, even more limited. But it turns out the MacBook Air is really great in a lot of ways that the MacBook One can't or won't be because it's too limited to, in size or thermals or whatever else. It can't achieve the same things as the MacBook Air. So what if Apple kind of was pressured by really customer reaction to the MacBook One, and what if they are going to continue kind of a MacBook Air, maybe even if just called a MacBook and it happens to be a 13-inch one?
Yeah, that's it. They would never. It's not going to be an Air in anything. It's just going to be a 13-inch MacBook One, and when it's 13-inch, and suddenly we have more room for USB ports.
Right. So maybe the new 13-inch MacBook One, quote, which is really an Air, maybe that uses the MacBook Air internal platform, those wonderful 15-watt CPUs that are an amazing balance of battery life and performance in Intel's lineup that right now, with what we know today so far, like if the MacBook Air goes away, there's nowhere for those CPUs to be used in the lineup. And that would be such a waste because they're so good. They're so compelling. It's such a great balance of what most people need out of performance and battery life. To have that be available in a 13-inch enclosure that is MacBook Air-like and MacBook-like, somewhere in the middle there, and to have those nice CPUs, it would have to have a fan, of course, because, those are a lot hotter CPUs, but that's okay for a lot of people. Everyone seems to get along with it just fine with every other laptop. That would be, I think, an amazing product to basically be a new 13-inch Retina Air. I've been assuming this whole time that rather than continue the MacBook Air line in a new way, that they were going to just shrink the MacBook Pro line enough so that the 13-inch MacBook Pro would get small enough to replace the 13-inch Air. But if they really wanted to keep the 13-inch Air shape and slot in the lineup going, they really could do a better job of it, keeping it going where with the same chipset it's using now, with that line of processors and internals and general shape and size, rather than trying to make the Pro smaller with the Pro's hotter CPUs, more ports, more capabilities, etc. So if this is true, that there's going to be a MacBook Air update, and if that old rumor of the 13-inch MacBook is actually tied in and it's actually the same thing, this could be an amazing computer that comes out of nowhere.
Well, I think you're kind of forgetting the Tim Cook factor, which is the only reason I'm still entertaining the ideas of the silly MacBook Air continuation. I mean, this is the Apple that kept the iPad 2 around for a really long time. This is the Apple that is rumored to keep the Apple Watch 1 around. What kind of company would continue selling a non-Retina MacBook Air with USB-C upgrade? Because you could make that machine, put, like you said, put 15-watt CPU in there with USB-C supporting chipset, keep the same old crappy non-Retina screen, and just keep selling it. What kind of monster would do that? Tim Cook's Apple.
That's true.
I'm saying not saying it's likely.
That's true.
It seems really, but I can't totally discount it because that's the thing. Hey, if people want to keep it's like taking it farther away from the whole speeds and feeds type thing, because there's plenty of product categories where you have a popular model and you just keep selling it. I think I just retweeted today. Someone posted a link to a teardown of the shaver at a barbershop that they shave the back of your neck with, the little recipient.
They shave my whole head with that, John.
Yeah, well, there you go. One of those that's 50 years old, and then the same device purchased in 2016. So 50-year gap, and they pull them apart to see whether they're different on the inside, because we've all seen that shaver our entire lives, right? It's a 50-year-old product, and if you look at a modern one, they don't look that much different. And guess what? On the inside, they're also not that different. Lots of industries sell a product that becomes popular, and if people keep buying it, let's keep selling it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And you're yeah, but computers, you kind of have to update those, right? And today's Apple is do you? Maybe we could keep selling a non-Retina screen for a really, really long. People keep buying it. People love that MacBook Air, and yeah, they would like the computer that Marco described even better, but you know how cheap we can make that Air now? And we paid for the tooling, and those non-Retina screens are dirt cheap, and how long can we sell the iPad to? Well, education, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Suckers keep buying this thing. Why are we bending over backwards to make new models? So I don't like that idea, and I don't think that's a good fit for technology. But Apple in recent years has really been stretching the bounds of what we previously considered a reasonable thing for a technology company to do. And their argument would be look, if we keep selling them, you think it's bad, oh, boo-hoo. Does your opinion matter? Customers are buying them, right? And then our, counter is obviously your long-term customer set is stupid. You're being penny wise, pound foolish, blah, blah. We can all have that debate. But that's the only reason I'm not 100% discounting the idea of an actual product labeled MacBook Air with a non-Retina screen and a USB-C port on the side, which would just be an abomination that no one wants to see lurch out onto the stage in any sort of presentation. But I live in fear of it.
Well, if that's all it is, there's no way it would be mentioned at the event. It would just kind of happen, and they would hope nobody noticed on the website.
People would notice. They're like, what? Non-retina? What?
The more I think about this, the more I think, well, obviously we know that there's a September 7th event, but what I think about that is it will be an iPhone, which everyone pretty much knows. I think there will be Apple Watch 2, and I think that'll be the whole event. I think there will be a brief event after this that will include a possibly entirely refreshed line of MacBooks and maybe even desktop Macs. I'm looking at you, Mini and Pro. God help us. I hope not the Pro.
Right.
And also the new monitor that it seems is probably coming, I think will be at that second event. What I'm not sure of is if the iPad will get any updates. I don't think so. And even if it does, where would that fall? Do they put that in next week's event because it's iOS? Do they put it in the Phantom later on event because it's a computer replacement? I'm not really sure. But I would guess iPhone and Watch next week, which is not a very controversial guess. But I do think there will be an event that is after that has many different kinds of Macs and a new display and whatever else they might want to release before the end of the year. That's
such an optimist. I would love for that to be true. And like I said, I really do think that little touch screen above the keyboard is something Apple should present to the public itself and not just do press briefings. But the fantasy event that Casey has outlined, where it's like there'll be a whole second event and they'll update the Mac Mini and the Pro. Oh, please! I can't bring myself to believe that anymore. I mean, I still believe that both those lines will be updated at some point in the future, and I really do believe that new laptops will be announced this year. But the idea of like, hey, like we're revamping the whole Mac line, and even that obscure computer that we never update gets an update, and even the Mac Pro, like. That's just too much. I can't fit that in my brain.
Yeah, no, to be clear, the Mac Mini, Mac Pro, those are me reaching. I'm not too confident about that. But I think the laptop refresh is big enough to them that it'll get its own event. And I think they feel like they have too much to talk about between iOS 10, iPhone 7, or whatever it's called, backpedaling, or not really backpedaling, but justifying the headphone jack, and watchOS 3, and probably Watch 2. I think that's more than enough for a 2-hour event next week. And thus, I hope and think that there will be enough laptop news to justify a brief event subsequent to next week. And my hope and my reach is that maybe it'll be more than just laptops.
I hope some part of that is right.
Yeah, I'm going to feel like a fool when I'm completely wrong. But you know what? There's no fun in betting the obvious.
The worst thing about the Macs is that my brain has already moved on to thinking about what the KB Lake ones will be like. Like, the other ones aren't even. It's just like I've already moved on because as they pointed out in the chat room, a lot of the stuff they have is like fixed function units for decoding new codecs for the what is it HEVC is that the 265 one?
Yes,
like better hardware support for the higher performance profiles of that, and like a bunch of DRM crap, of course, so that you can basically like all the streaming services that want to send 4K, they demand new DRM crap so that you can, so that your PC or your Mac is allowed to show Netflix 4K content. They do the happy handshake and, support HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2 and all. Like, I hate all that stuff.
That'll fix piracy.
And yes, it's so dumb. And I always think like, where is the Blu-ray limit? Like, because Apple didn't even include Blu-ray because it was too much of a pain in the ass. At a certain point, all this DRM stuff is going to be like, you know what? You can't watch Netflix on your computer anymore because it's too much of a pain in the ass. Netflix is a bag of herd. Watch on your damn TV. Let the TV manufacturers deal with all this stuff. But so far, Apple still seems on board with it. Certainly Intel is. And these Kaby Lake ones are the super low power ones. They're not the ones that are ever going to go into desktop. I don't think any of the ones with the good GPUs that Apple wants, the Iris Pro things, are out. So it's not as if we're expecting these this year. But, as we said in past shows, what you can do, Apple, to show that you're dedicated to the Mac line is when these Kaby Lake things ship in volume, upgrade your computers to use them next year. How about that?
Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Casper, Contentful, and Eero, and we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin. 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
In any case, I switched caselist.com to Hover.
I saw you're tweeting about it.
Did you use the Valet transfer service?
I did.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was the thing.
I'm always weird about giving them my password. I always just do it myself.
You could also just change your password, then give
I know
the new
the
one to
procedure. It just feels weird. Change it to test and give it to, I know the drill, but it just seems weird to me. I just you know what, I'll just do it myself. And I've come close so many times. I'm like, this sucks so bad, and they're like, no, let me just do it. And it's eventually you get through and you find the secret place in whatever crappy registrar you're using where they let you unlock it and transfer. And I think I have almost everything over to Hover now. Every time they expire, I bring them over.
Yeah, I'd never transferred a domain before, and I was using. Do you remember way back in the day? It was popular to run servers out of your house, but you were on dial-up, or maybe you had an IP that changed regularly on a cable modem.
Dyn DNS.
Yeah. Yep, I was still using them up until 2 weeks ago.
I'm still using No IP, which is the same service as Dyn DNS.
Yep. So I was using Dyn, which I always thought read as Din, but you are right, Marco. I'm almost positive it's Dyn.
Yeah, you get Dyn right, but you still call it Mauve, huh?
Yeah, it's Mauve.
Because Dyn is the beginning of dynamic.
Yeah.
So move is the beginning of movie.
And it's a Mavi file.
Yeah. Let's go to the Mavis. Let's all
go
go
out
to the
Mavis. I'm giving you an air high five, John Syracuse. So
there you go.